Sorry, muted myself there. Good morning, guys. Welcome out to Revolution. We are going to continue to go through James White's material, specifically his book, The King James Only Controversy. Can we trust the modern translations? And so obviously that question is a hypothetical that we can trust the modern translations. But then when you put James White on the spot, he's like, well, no, we can't trust the NIV. That's a liberal translation. It's so strange. But anyway, so I'm reading through this article here. Now, I might just grab that for my search. We're about halfway through, so I thought, well, maybe I can just do an episode going through this. Now, this was written quite a long time ago. It is by Tom Whitney. Now, I have no idea who this is. Don't demonize me for quoting his work. I have no idea about the guy. But what we read through last time was quite interesting. And so I had read through the whole article, and I thought it was worth talking about. But when we get to this section here, he does mention Ruckman and Ripplinger. Now, obviously, there are people who are in what would be labeled as the King James, TR, whatever camp, and they have gotten their information through these people. I commented on a video the other day that was about Gail Ripplinger, and I said Gail Ripplinger probably gets about 50% of what she writes correct, and the other 50% is error, misquotation, and just being paranoid and delusional. And I purposely said that because I find her book strange. It's a bit like Texe Marrs trying to defend the King James. He might get on a program and say the King James is the best Bible, you should read it, and I would agree with that. But then he's like, because the other Bibles are, Illuminati conspiracy, they have the 666 on the cover, and and just start going into all this weird stuff. And I always have tried to separate myself from that type of material. Once I've sort of known other alternatives and more sophisticated commentary on the issues of the Textus Receptus, of the King James, I've gravitated more towards that. And anything like Ruckmanism, anything like the Gail Ripplinger stuff, even some of Sam Gipp's stuff can be a bit weird. And so I sort of feel too that these people, they isolate themselves and they put themselves in their own little echo chamber. And we've seen this with the whole Joseph Armstrong. Like, he runs a Facebook group called Friends of Gail Ripplinger. Now, I'm not really a friend of Gail Ripplinger, but I thought, well, if they're talking about stuff and if she's bringing out new material, and I'm going to get thrown into her bag anyway. It's like you and Gail Ripplinger are joined at the hip anyway. It's like, oh, okay. It's like some auntie I've got somewhere all of a sudden, and I'm going to be labelled as, like, the news media are going to come out, the Mark Wards and the James Whites of the world are going to say that I'm somehow related to this person. So I was like, well, I may as well, follow what's going on. And so Joseph Armstrong's started questioning some of Gail Ripplinger's material, and he said that some of her chapters, entire chapters, need to just be deleted from her book. They're so bad. And I was sort of waiting for this because, I mean, you don't cross these people without getting slapped, And so at the moment he's getting slapped, and I noticed that he's got a video coming up. I don't remember what time it's coming on, but I was reading through some of the Facebook posts, and it's got Gail Ripplinger's daughter, and they're all scolding, Joseph Armstrong for basically thinking for himself and going, actually, what Gail Rippling is saying here is wrong. And then he's like, oh, this is terrible, and talking about it. And so because you do that, you're anathema. You may as well have blasphemed the Holy Spirit half the time. Because what these people do is all ordained of God, and I don't know, the Jerks for Jesus crowd tend to hang around the Ripplinger circles, specifically the Ruckman circles. So I did have to bring that up because we are entering into a part of the article where he starts talking about that James White has demonized Ruckman and all the rest of it. Perhaps he has. I don't know that much about Ruckman to be able to defend him on these points. Perhaps Ruckman needs, to be exposed here, and I don't really know. So when I'm going through those things, I'm just going to say, hey, I don't know. But thankfully this article is not filled with those type of things. He is trying to just critique James White's book. Now, as I've been going through James White's book, which I have here, I got to a section where the last time I was specifically talking about the book, we talked about Sinaiticus, and we're gonna go through and look at a few other things, but I read half of this last time, and then I sort of thought, well, he talks about Ripplinger and talks about Ruckman in a bit of a favorable light, so maybe I shouldn't read the rest of it. And I thought, well, actually I should, because it's just a fact that there are going to be people on all sides. If it was a James Snap article, I wouldn't agree with what James Snap's saying on everything, but I would probably just agree with the sentiments that are brought out. And usually if there's something wrong, we're big boys and girls, we can say, well, I don't agree with that particular thing. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to start reading through this, and this will probably spark a whole lot of conversation and a lot of thought. I'm not sure how old this article is. As far as I can tell, this is probably done in like the 2000s, perhaps. If he mentions a second reprint or a second edition, then it's more modern. Okay, so he's 25th edition, 27th edition. So he's not really mentioning the 28th edition. So I guess it's probably around the 2000s, I guess. But Westcott and Hort is where we were. Yep. Okay, so we've got a few people. We've got Docky in the house, living the dream. Boulder's a lion. Boulder's Lion says, leave it to Nick to expose the weird stuff. Oh, Auntie Gail. Now, I remember as a new Christian, there was lots of material given to me. The internet was just sort of starting, and Christian material was appearing all over the internet. But it was people like Texe Marrs who were pioneering, that type of thing. So you're reading these articles about political views, and everything was just so conspiratorial that it got ridiculous. And then specifically with the Y2K thing, so many of these pastors and Christian leaders got it wrong. And moderate voices like someone like Dave Hunt, he was just demonized as like, look, you're not going far enough. You should be an alarmist. And then he just said, look, sure, it's fine to stock up a bit of food for any reason, for a cyclone or, hurricane, whatever they call it in the States, or an earthquake. But sure, do that. But, the Bible says, these are the beginning of sorrows. It says, see that you be not troubled. All these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. So he was saying, don't be troubled. Don't freak out about this. And you're just, but see, what was not really well known back then was that Texe Marrs was a post-trib guy. And he believed that we were going to go through the tribulation period, where someone like Dave Hunt was a pre-trib guy. And he's like, well, the Bible says, be not troubled. We're look up, for your redemption draws nigh. When these things begin to take place, the beginning of sorrows, when they first begin, look up, And so, so I just sort of mentioned that. Now, what's happened over the years is there are certain people who have just become very popular. We can't help who get popular. That usually, it's like rock stars. I mean, you might not like Eminem, but he is popular. You might hate him. You might think he's disgusting, an idiot, whatever. But you can't stop the fact that other people like him. Other people listen to his music. And I was with a 54-year-old guy the other day, and he was playing Eminem. And he said he loves Eminem. And I'm thinking, surely let me out of this room. Now, sure, Eminem's a clever guy, smart guy, good business model. All these guys, Dr. Dre and all these, they're all very smart, intelligent people. They're making a lot of money, but they're obviously in the world. They're not saved. They have no idea about the kingdom of God. But we can't help the fame that people are getting. Taylor Swift, I just don't see why. But some people see why, and they love what she's doing. They'll throw money at her. They'll buy tickets worth $300. They'll jump on an airplane and fly up halfway around the world to see her. And so in the groups that we're in, we have these type of characters who, the Ruckman, specifically Peter Ruckman, but then there's the Ruckmanites. Now, the Ruckmanites are an interesting crew. I've run the Facebook group Exposing Peter Ruckman for quite a long time. And when I first started that group, I had dozens and dozens of Ruckmanites jumping on there, sprouting all this stuff. And I had no idea whether Peter Ruckman believed what they were saying or not. But they were just some of the most toxic jerks I've ever met. Anyway. And I understand you do get toxic jerks, in the critical text side. I've been dealing with a few of them lately. And what can you do? What can you say? Now, I try not to group everyone together, because as far as I can see, when I listen to someone, I'll just randomly go through YouTube, see a video and go, oh, that looks interesting. And it's someone like Andrew Sluder. And I listen through it and go, no, I don't agree with this. Oh, yeah, I do agree with that. Or what's that guy? Robert Breaker. I listen to his stuff. He's hugely popular. Or Gene Kim. I don't usually gravitate towards their stuff, but sometimes I listen to it and go, okay, I agree to a certain point. And then they'll talk about, how if you lift up the tail of the third horse in Revelation, you'll find, the number 0, and that equates to infinity, and that means 666, and that means the King James Bible is perfect. They just got all these weird numerology stuff that I'm just like, guys, please stop doing this. And even what it does, it gives like Mark Ward and others, James White, the ability to just sort of lump us all together and then say, look, see, let's go to the lowest hanging fruit, the silliest thing that anyone in that whole group is saying, the silliest thing, and we'll bring that to the fore and say, see, these King James. If you have the King James, if you favor the King James, if you believe the Textus Receptus is the Word of God, then you may as well be into numerology, And I pointed out to James White, he actually brought it up on his program, that the whole dating game, not datings for singles, but the dating game of manuscripts, is just as much like a voodoo as what these guys are bringing up. These guys are like, well, this verse has so many words, and if you go to the middle verse of this Bible, it's got so many words. See, that's the design of the King James Bible and all this sort of stuff. And I said to James White, look, I think your dating methods are strange and like voodoo. A lot of it's just guesswork. A lot of it's not science. But they sometimes, everything that they're saying, they'll talk about things for 2 hours, and it all hinges on just some guy going, well, that writing there looks like 4th century. Let's go with it. And that's it. Just some dude. And so many people have been wrong over the years with, look at art forgeries. It went wherever there's money involved with manuscripts and artwork, and we know there's a lot of forgeries around. Dead Sea Scrolls, forged. Who would go to that effort to forge a bunch of Dead Sea Scrolls? The Museum of the Bible tested their scrolls, and all of them were fake. All of the ones that the Museum of the Bible guys had bought were fake. And that, like, I think they were hoping that, you know, they would find something that was like, you know, wow, this is really old and that could be a showpiece or whatever. And it's like, sorry guys, these are all fake. And that's what we find. The more that they start testing a lot of these manuscripts that are you're deemed as so old, oftentimes they're writing them off. So that's why there is a reluctance to test Sinaiticus and Vaticanus, because if we find out that Vaticanus is like a 12th century manuscript or something like that, it's like, oh, it's not as old. Or Sinaiticus, you know, if it is a forgery, you know, imagine that there goes the whole critical text industry. The billion-dollar Bible industrial complex fails. And so we know there are scams, there are climate scams, there are health scams, you know, and we would be the dumbest people in the world if we didn't think that there were scams in religion, specifically to do with Christianity, where the devil really wants to get in. You know, the devil can be involved in these scams. Half the time it's just the evil of man. But when it comes to the Bible, the devil is particularly interested in saying, hath God said? And let's just put, you know, questionable things in the margins of all of these Bibles. So everyone's just in doubt and everyone can be their own, you know, make up their own word of God. And, you know, we can all become little Bart Ehrmans. And that's, if I was the devil, that's what I would do. I would think about it and I would be there in the Bible societies. I mean, the Bible societies basically were Unitarian back in the 1830s. You know what I mean? And then they just compromise with Rome, the United Bible Societies, and then the Nestle Alarm text. I mean, Nestle, I had a quote from him, and I want to say this. Where are we? On my website. I put it into the Nestle chat. I'll just quickly go to my recent changes. And here we are, Everhard Nestle. Listen to what Nestle said. Okay, so this is 1901. The text of our present critical editions, so we'll be talking about Westcott and Hort, the Weiss text, the Weymouth text, and the one that Nestle has worked on, is a patchwork of many colors, more wonderful than the cloak of Childe Roland of old. In fact, it is a text that never really existed at all. Like, how's that? He doesn't even think that text has ever even existed. Like, are they looking for the original text? You know, these are the type of quotations, like his name, Nestle, is on the cover. Nestle Alarm. Yeah, even Kurt Aland is off the wall. But anyway, we're going to look at a few other things here. But okay, so it says here, so the conclusion of the last video was when White attacks / defends people, he gives limited material / quotes. This could possibly give the reader an impression about a person that may not be the case. Okay, so that's one thing that I've seen with James White with his material. Oftentimes he'll be saying, well, Gail Ripplinger says this and says that. And it's like, okay, well, yeah, she does, you know. And people on the Textus Receptus side, Dean Burgon Society, D.A. Waite, you know, people like Kirk DeVitro, Phil Stringer, many of these guys have written against some of the concepts of Gail Ripplinger and pointed out where she, you know, makes major mistakes. But as I'm going through James White's material, there are so many mistakes in his book, and most of it is just his own interpretation of things. And he'll just have a few references here and there just to, you know, he might find someone in history who backs up his view. But there are so many errors and so many mistakes in James White's book that it needs to be rejected. Like, and I really wanted to bring this up at the beginning because I want to just go through his 5 categories. Now, I know for some of you who have watched all these videos, this will bore you to tears. But for other people, this just shows you the category errors of James White. So I'm going to go to Facebook. Now, there is this guy on there who jumped on my Textus Receptus Academy. And what what some people do, they join the TR Academy group and then they block me. I'm an admin. And so I'm not, if I disapprove of something they've said and put an angry face or, or a shocked face or whatever, it doesn't even allow me to do that on my own group. And I go to comment sometimes on personal, because you got the main thread, on personal little things on the side, like sub threads. I can't even comment there as an admin. Like I'm the only admin. I run the whole group. And so, I sort of have to block some of these guys. But what I've started to do is put these guys on a leash where because we're not against Contras coming on and saying, hey, we think you guys are a bunch of idiots. Here we go. Here's my argument. We're fine with that because we believe that we have something that's defensible. We're not afraid of criticism. People who are afraid of criticism are usually those who don't have an answer. If you don't have an answer for things, you're not going to jump into the debate arena and start defending something that you don't feel confident that you can adequately defend. We believe we can defend things. We believe we have a strong bibliology. We believe we're correct. And people like James White and Dan Wallace and Mark Ward, these people are just simply wrong with their main position and all the other subgroups and categories that they come up with. And so I want to show you just the main mistakes here. So if we just go, I'll show you my, this is my Textus Receptus Academy. We've got nearly 4,500 people there, which is pretty cool. Okay, this guy, Brian David. Okay, looks like he might have unblocked. No, I can click on it. See, I can't click on it and it goes anywhere. On my phone, it goes to a page and says this page does not exist. And it's like, okay. So, but he's on a leash as of now, sort of thing. So let's look at what he's saying here. Whoops, there we go. King James Bible just distributed in Africa by some guy. Mark Ward will be definitely saying that's a sin. Okay, here it is. So it's the same guy, you can see. Which camp do you fall under? Based on your camp, what hope is there in the religion of KJV onlyism for those who cannot speak English? See, straight away, this guy jumps on the group and assumes that we're just like, it's English only, and most of us have been funding or been involved with translations into other languages. There's many people who support the Spanish Bible, the Gomez edition. Many people who have, I've given people Hebrew Bibles that are Textus Receptus based, Indonesian Bibles, so many different language editions, worked on language editions. And on my Textus Receptus site, I've got tons of different languages and trying to point people to the latest material on that. So because sometimes I'll find a little chunk of information about the Romanian Bible and people don't know about it. So I put it on my site. So at least when they're doing a Google search, they can find that material. I'll find an email of a pastor who's already done the New Testament or something. That way they can be connected, But this guy's just like, you guys only speak English, and this is just the low understanding of some of these people. Not all of them, but it is a common accusation that comes up on YouTube, comes up on many different platforms of like, you guys only focus on the English. And it's like, it's called the Textus Receptus Academy. We're promoting also the Greek. We're promoting also the Hebrew, which are different languages. It's just silly. And then he says, I know that some of you who are TR only, though I would argue they're all really closeted KJV onlyists. And then he says, because when they're asked what English TR translations they prefer or accept, I've never heard on say anything outside of the KJV. Well, I certainly have. Some people are TR and they prefer the New King James. Some people are TR and they prefer modern editions. Some people think the word church is a mistake. Baptism is a mistake. They think Easter is a mistranslation. They have a lot of argumentation against the King James. Some people are TR and they hate the King James. And now I've been in many different groups. You look at this one, I've got 4,500 members there. So I'm moderating this. So obviously I'm going to have people write things all the time on my groups and talk about these things. So I know, it's not just like I'm just sitting here, just, looking at the wall and I don't know what's going on. There are other groups, which I'll just open a new tab. Say if I go to the Textus Receptus one, Textus Receptus. Yeah, so this is my group here as well. 7,200 followers. Now, we've had about at least 500 followers for the last 10 years. Sorry, 5,000 followers for the last 10 years. People talking on them, many people who have built websites defending the King James. They want to jump on here and throw things out, argue about things, and all the rest of it. And so over the years, I've watched people who are TR only, and they don't defend exclusively the King James. Now, this is one of the things. Mark Ward is a liar, okay? And I'll just say that because he lies. Now, in Jeff Riddle's video, when he's talking about the Septuagint, Mark Ward said, well, the only reason that they're trying to talk about the Septuagint now and all the rest of it is because they want to defend King James onlyism. And when Jeff Riddle was going through this, he had Brett Malin on his program. Brett said, look, I did a session there. I talked. I got invited to talk. Now, the piece of paper or the email or whatever he got of what he could talk about and the parameters of, being part of the the Reformation Bible Society, is that they could quote from the King James or the Geneva Bible or the New King James. Now, does that sound like King James onlyism to you? That's Jeff Riddle's group. And so Mark Ward jumps on, does a critique video of what they're doing and says, it's King James onlyism. And he's like, why aren't these guys going with the New King James? Blah, blah. And in their whole conference, every single person who got up to speak received an email saying you could speak from the New King James, you can speak from the Geneva, you can speak from the King James. But then later on, Mark Ward's like, no, they're promoting King James onlyism. It's like, what? So he's just a liar. And the thing is, Jeff Riddle will prove this in a video. Everyone will watch it, but Mark Ward will just, go along, happily. Yeah, who knows what his agenda is? I have no idea, but it's definitely not for the pursuit of truth. Because if I'd made such a big error like that and someone made a video about it and said, hey, Nick has said this, it's just wrong, why doesn't he retract it? I would make an apology video. Now, the only time I've ever seen him do that was when he just made some weird claim about Stephen Anderson. Like, Stephen Anderson's wrong here. And then Stephen Anderson got on and just said, no, you're wrong. It was such an easy thing to disprove. And then he did it like 8 crow and was like, oh, sorry. So I don't know if Mark Ward just hasn't got the goods to actually figure these things out, whether he's like just making dozens and dozens of errors and just demonizing people, throwing them under the bus, mislabeling, miscategorizing things. I don't know if he's just doing that because he has no idea what he's doing, or if he's just completely dishonest. I've gotten to the point where I gravitate more towards he is dishonest. Now, there are some things he doesn't know about, but usually he doesn't talk about it. That's why he's like, don't talk about the text, and it's like, well, why not? Everyone talks about the text and the translation. They talk about everything. They talk about the whole subject. He's like, I only want to talk about this little thing. And it's like, and then if you don't just stick to his parameters, you're uncharitable. And the the thought police sort of come out and it's like, oh, you've got a bad tone. You're angry. You're aggressive. You're toxic. You're vitriolic. Why does Nick Sayers hate me? Like, why do I hate him? It's like, I pointed out where you're wrong. How do you equate that to me hating you? You know what I mean? If I point out where Donald Trump's wrong, do I hate Trump? If I point out where Kamala Harris is wrong, do I hate her? So I just hope they all get saved. I hope everyone lives a good Christian life. I hope people just make it into eternity. I have the best intentions for everyone. I don't hate anyone. But imagine saying that, I just hate him because I'm just pointing out where he's made a few mistakes. I mean, imagine being a math teacher and someone said, 1 + 1 = 3, and you're like, sorry, Billy, that's really bad and it's wrong. We're going to have to, you're going to have to stay behind and learn. And it's like, why do you hate me, miss or mister or whatever? And it's like, I don't hate you. I'm just trying to teach you. I'm trying to show you the truth. The truth is the answer's 2. It's not 3. But then the next time it's like, no, it's 3. You hate me, and just doubling down. That's what I see Mark Ward doing. It's when we're little kids, we get told sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. But here we have a group absolutely obsessed with pigeonholing people. Okay. And that's one of the reasons why I have to do a caveat in front of a lot of these videos, because it's like they mention Peter Ruckman. I'm not into Ruckmanism. I'm not part of his crew. I know James White said it 7,000 times on his show that we're all the same. All TR people are the same. We're all Ripplingerites. We're all Gippites. We're all Andersonites. I'm really sorry, and you have to have all this excuse because it's a bit like I remember in the 1980s. There was a lot of, because I was writing the heavy metal and stuff like that, and so, but there was heavy metal music. It's like classical music. It's incredible. People playing guitar, amazingly, drummers, and it was pioneering a whole new different thing. So when you're young, obviously unsaved and listening to all these bands, it's like, wow, that's amazing. But then all these glam hair bands come along and say, we're heavy metal too. And so nowadays, when you're like, when people say, oh, what sort of music were you into when you're younger? You're like, oh, it's writing the heavy metal. They think of the hair thing. You know what I mean? And you're like, no, nothing to do with that. Just people, normal type of people, who were just playing music, but no, it's like, you're associated now with this hair thing, and so that's what they want to do with the Ripplinger, the Ruckman, all this type of thing. They want, when you say King James, they want people immediately in their thoughts to go Ruckman, Ripplinger, Yip, Anderson. That they love that, and that's what they really want to talk about constantly. But then when it comes down to it, we'll bring up like an academic argument against what they're saying, and they're like, "Oh, you're a Ruckmanite," and so they just demonize you, which is really slander. That's what they're doing. That they are slanderers, because I'm often saying, "Hey, I'm not associated with these people," but I never hear Mark Ward saying, "Hey, I'm not associated with Carlo Martini. I'm not associated with James White or Dan Wallace or what." He's usually saying, "Hey, these guys are good." Well, he doesn't say that about Carlo Martini. The people who are absolute, heretics and Protestants would just, gag when they see a picture of these people who've worked on their Bible. They just don't really mention them. It's like, just shh. Let's just move them aside. And we're Protestants, and the New King James guys, they're all good guys. They're, butter wouldn't melt in their mouth. They're all good religious people who have, a beautiful home and, lovely children. And they're just, they go on about, a testimony. Like a Jehovah's Witness has a beautiful house and lovely children. You know what I mean? It doesn't make what they've done correct. You can have your doctrine 100% correct and still write an article that's not right, or do some translation work that's not correct. So anyway, that's my rant. I'm going to quickly show you this one. No, not that one. So he says here, so de facto, they are very loose on their label there. No, according to Brian David, we're all just TR, only King James only, we're all just the same. But at least some TR onlyness will allow respect and freedom for those who aren't natively English speaking to be allowed to read non-English TR-based translations. If not any God-fearing, honest translations that get them integrated to regularly reading God's word. Just the Bible commands. Who knew? So anyway, it's a bit confusing how he's written it. But these are the 5 categories of James White. So I like the KJV the best. So remember, these are the 5 categories of KJV onlyism. So imagine if I was making 5 categories of you're a Nazi. Okay, 5 categories. I go to Germany. It's 1938, and I'm like, okay, which political party do you like the best? Well, I like Adolf Hitler. He made the Autobahn. He did this and that. Because it was really up until like the late 30s that everything really turned sour for everyone. Up until then, Hitler was doing a lot of really good things. The world had just been in a depression, and Germany had boomed. They'd been in depression in 1923 and 24, where the money had just collapsed. But then Hitler got them out of that, which a lot of people saw that was the work of Hitler. So they were praising him, saying, wow, this guy's great. He's done great for the economy. And then all of a sudden, World War II just absolutely destroyed them. So if you're like, I like the KJV best, or, likes it for style. So you're a King James onlyist if you just like the King James. Okay, you're a King James onlyist. Is that fair? If you jumped on any group to do with Bible translation and said, hey, my name's Bob, I'm a King James onlyist, what do you think they're going to think of you? They're going to think that you're a Ruckmanite. But you're just saying, I like the King James the best. But according to James White's categorization system, you're a Nazi. You are absolutely like an SS platoon leader. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying about just the average German person. You can't say, well, they're a Nazi. You know what I mean? Nazism was imposed upon them as well, not just upon everyone else in Europe. I mean, you're there chanting. I remember a really good friend of mine, he said when his mum grew up in Germany, said when the Germans walked past the house and they're heading off to Russia, they all went out the front and waved and cheered. And then a few years later, when the Russians came past the same house, they all waved and cheered. He said it's what they did, but usually it's like, oh, these Germans, they supported Hitler. Most of the people in those days had no idea about anything. It's just a leadership change. Anyway, so if you like it for style, you don't actually make big theological claims, you're indifferent to other languages. Actually, that's not even James White's categorization. He's got the 5 things here, but he's added to that. So I might even just get James White's book, which is right here. I'll read it straight from the source. Here's his miscategorization. And I think a lot of people are actually waking up to this, because I know some people do watch these videos and they don't tell anyone that they're watching them. But I've sort of heard people really go, yeah, those categories are bad. They're just ridiculous. So the first group, so I'm reading exactly as it says here. I like the KJV the best. And it's not what's written there. This group of individuals would believe that the King James Version is the best single English translation available today. Thus, belief might be based on the rhythmic beauty of the work as a whole, or upon its historical importance, or any other number of factors. This group, however, would not deny the possibility of a better translation being made. They would simply state that such a translation has not yet arrived. These individuals are only marginally KJV only. So you're only just on the cusp of being a Nazi. But when you say, hey, apparently, according to James White, I'm a King James only, people are, oh, so you killed Jews, did you? You had concentration camps. It's like, oh, no. I just lived in Germany during the war, and I'm just German. That's it. And it's like, no, you're a Nazi. You're just demonized. These individuals are only marginally King James Version only. They would not be militant in their perspective and probably would not insist that everyone else agree with them. They have no need to address this particular group. They have no reason to seek to discourage them from using the King James Version as their translation of choice. So we have no need to address this particular group, and we have no reason to seek to discourage it. So what it's saying is, so this is like someone like TurretinFan. Now, he had Mark Ward on his program the other day, and TurretinFan uses the King James for everything. Now, he doesn't think it's perfect. He would fall into that type of category. But is he King James only? Would TurretinFan say, hey, yeah, I'm a King James onlyist? That's what James White is saying. That's why the categories are so bad. Like he clearly says these individuals are only marginally King James only. You just got a little bit of AIDS, just a little bit. You're a little bit of a Nazi. No, if you've got the Nazi T-shirt, if you're wearing a swastika, it's like you're a Nazi. But this is the thing. James White's handing out these T-shirts with King James only, and you're just there like, well, I'm labeled a King James only now. What does that mean? It means that you actually like the King James for its poetic style, and it's nice, it's historical. So you're a King James onlyist. So and that's why this is done purposely so that anyone even just using the King James can be demonized as a Ruckmanite, as a Gippite, or a Ripplinger, or Andersonite, whatever you want to say. So then you got the textual argument. Listen to the textual argument is saying that Zane Hodges, who's a majority text person, is a King James onlyist. Like, how's that? Yes, these people worked on the New King James, but of course these people did the majority text. Now, some people say, well, I'm a Byzantine guy. Byzantine basically means that there's 2,000 words in the Textus Receptus that you don't want there, and there's thousands of changes. And so, I'm definitely not a Byzantine text guy. And the thing is, a lot of this comes from, was it Caspar Rene Gregory's work, or was it von Soden's work? I always get them mixed up. But the 300 manuscripts, that was the first original majority text. It's not a representative of all 5,000, because no one's collated all those manuscripts yet. But so, and the thing is too, people who are majority text Byzantine priority and all this, they will say that homoioteliton, yes, that's a reality. We, sometimes we can spot that. Well, that's all Erasmus did. Erasmus is going through manuscripts, spotting where these things were, seeing, looking at the Latin, looking at the Greek, looking at the early church writers, and seeing where there are things changed, missing, misrepresented, and amending those. So doing proper textual criticism, not the type of textual criticism that's around today. The shortest reading's the best, and all this type of thing. And so, but anyway, the textual argument is majority text. How's that? So it's not even TR people who are King James onlyists. James Snap's a King James onlyist. Dwayne Green's a King James onlyist. Everyone who's a majority text is a King James onlyist. Like, how people say Gail Ripplinger's book is silly. That's why sometimes people that they have a meltdown when I'm like, well, James White's book is worse than Gail Ripplinger's book, because these categories are so ridiculous, and the obsession with giving everyone the racist label or the Nazi label or the you're woke label or you're cancelled label. The King James only label is just a smear term. So that when we bring up an argument, when we show them the data, the facts and the science, they can reject that and say, well, no, you're a flat earther, sort of thing. And you're like, well, no, I'm not a flat earther. Oh, yes, you are. And you're like, I don't agree with Ruckman. I don't agree with Ripplinger. I don't agree with these people. Yes, sometimes I do, because they're just stating fact. In Gail Ripplinger's book, sometimes she just has a list of words and shows where they're changed, like in the NIV. It's like, well, you can't, that's just facts and figures. But then she'll give her opinion on it, and it's like, well, Texe Marrs has entered the room, So then we have the received text only, which is like, TR only sort of thing. But some people who are TR only, I remember one guy, he stole the label from my website, the Textus Receptus website. And he stole that label and used it for his own group. And so people thought it was me. So lots of people were joining the group. And then he was saying, well, the King James is filled with errors. We should get away from the King James and all this. And it was like, let's go back to the Geneva Bible. And some people are Geneva Bible only, that they just like Geneva's the best. And you read their arguments and it's just strange. But there are people like that. They like the TR, but they don't like the King James. And so, but apparently those people as well are King James onlyists, according to James White. So the three categories at the beginning of King James onlyists are wrong, are just silly. Yes, there are people who are received text only who are King James preferred and all the rest of it. But then you have the King James inspired group. But then it depends on how you define inspired, because if you have, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, well, what's mistranslated there? Nothing. That's in multiple languages. If it says the same thing in Arabic, and it says the same thing in Urdu, says the same thing in Sanskrit, says the same thing in Chinese and English and Greek, Hebrew, that's what it says. So if you have something equal to those words, it is inspired. Because inspiration isn't something that just appears. Inspiration is something that happened to the original words. They were inspired by God. But if in a language you have exactly what's written, it's inspired. It carries that inspiration across into that other language. A translation is something that's carried across. Like transportation. It's something that's carried across from one language to another in a translation. And if the meaning is exactly the same, then there's no problem. The inspiration is still there. But apparently, if you've got an inspired King James, you're weird. But then it sort of mingles in a bit of a TR position with it, or the King James is accurate. So if you believe the King James is an accurate translation of the Textus Receptus, then that's a cultic position, apparently, according to James White. So even then, he misrepresents people, because he, a sort of like a camp that I would fit into is, I believe the Textus Receptus is akin to the originals. And I believe the King James is a perfect translation of the Textus Receptus. And so that's where I stand, where people, what they do, they usually come up and say, so where's a place in the King James that you would fix? And it's like, well, if I was living in 1611, I wouldn't fix anything. All the words are perfect. Now, as far as, updating words that are out of usage, yeah, that's fine. I don't think really, there's not many people who have a problem with that. There are people who do have a problem with it. I'm not one of them. So you got the King James inspired group. Then you got, the KJV is a new revelation, and that's where you get people using Psalm 12, 6 and 7 as, talking about preservation is the English Bible. And it's like, no. Yes, the preservation is there because it is an accurate translation of the Hebrew and the Greek, but it's not, okay, well, it took that long for it to be preserved properly, and we got a re-preservation. That's ridiculous. And that's the type of thing where, that's what I would call true King James onlyism. King James is better than everything, sort of thing. It's better than the originals, sort of thing. And so that's where I draw the line. I'm like, no, the King James is akin to the originals in English, but it's not better. And so that's where they're saying, okay, it's a new revelation. So out of the 5 categories, I mean, there's only really one that I would say is King James only. So basically it's like saying, well, I'm from Germany, and people are like, oh, you're literally Hitler. that's sort of the category error that we're seeing here, where people say, I read the King James because it's a beautiful book, because it's historically valid, because it's, majesty and prose and all this stuff. Oh, you're a King James only. And people are like, well, I'm a majority text guy. I don't even, James Snabby's, I don't follow the TR. I sort of fight against it in many places. Well, you're a King James onlyist as well. And people are like, well, I'm a Textus Receptus person. I don't even like the King James though. But you're a King James onlyist as well. So everyone's it's sort of like at Oprah, you get a car, you get, well, you're a King James only, you're a King James, we're all King James only. Like everyone who is just not a critical text person is King James only. So it's sort of like, when you just realize, hang on, everyone's a racist. If you're just white, you're white, so you're a racist, and you start realizing this as you get older. You're like, hang on, if you're just a white person, then apparently you've got to say sorry to someone somewhere just for being born the color you are. And it's funny, like people come from Ireland or come from Russia and they move to America, and apparently they've got to apologize for slavery that happened hundreds of years ago. And it's like, you don't know much about Irish or Russian history, do you? But yeah, so we see this false categorization. It's like, oh, I like jazz music, and just picking the worst, most annoying jazz music and go, oh, you like that, do you? So no, it's a little bit more nuanced than that. There is good jazz and there's bad jazz. There's there's good music and bad music. There's but no, they just choose the worst case scenario, throw you under the bus. You are pigeonholed, you're labeled, you have the t-shirt, you have the hat, King James only, I love Ruckman, Ripplinger, all the rest of it, all the badges. And all you really wanted to do was say, hey, I believe this is the Bible. It's like, no, you're Ruckmanite. So I'll go through some of these comments and then I'll start reading this. I've got to remember to have a sip. Helg Evanson is in the house, all the way from Norway. Jeshiran, Westcott and Hortnessel Eland were all occultists. Yeah, some of them were. You can't deny that. Even Mark Ward, in his attempt to defend these guys, was like, well, they did seances. And I think it was Westcott who did it. He attended seances. And then around that time, he was saying, it's the vile Textus Receptus and all this. And when you read that in context, he only knew a tiny little bit about the Textus Receptus. He didn't know much at all. And he's already set in his mind that I'm going to attack it. I'm going to usurp it. I'm going to come against it. Like, wouldn't you think that that's a biased presupposition to have? You don't even know much about a subject. And that's what I find too. There are some subjects that I know a lot about. And so along comes someone like, you're wrong. And it's like, no, I'm not actually wrong. Here, read this, think this, So like 3 years later, they're still like, you're wrong. And you've been the one who actually teaches them about the topic because they didn't even know about it. But they've just kept their stance. Like, I've got a presupposition that you're wrong, and no matter what you show me, you're going to be wrong. Bold as a lion is living the dream. Hudson's in the house. The teenage reformer is having a great time. Pastor Brett's in the house. Now, me and Pastor Brett are going to have a friendly discourse debate on Once Saved, Always Saved. And so this was a challenge by Brett. So we haven't set up any dates or anything yet, but I'm sure that'll come to light as this week rolls on. Bold as a Lion is saying hello. Valid Core says Mark Ward keeps on pointing out lately that he doesn't discuss the manuscripts only, that we can't understand KJV in English. So, I mean, the thing is, every King James group, from Bible Protector to Ruckman to D.A. Waite, Dean Burgon Society, to the Trinitarian Bible Society, they've all made archaic word lists. So they're all like, yeah, there's old words in the Bible. There's words that we don't understand. There's words that have the same spelling and everything, but they mean something different today. The word gay, for example, And so no one was unaware of this. And Mark Ward's come along and said, no one knows anything. Hey, you guys have old words in an old book. And we're all like, yeah. He brought out his book, I think it was like 2019. I'd done a 2016 edition of the King James Version. What do I asked Mike Ward, what do you think I was doing to update those words? I was looking at words that are archaic and updating them to what a modern word would be. It's quite a simple process. I'm looking through lists of, D.A. Waite, Define King James, Trinitarian Bible Society material, a whole bunch of stuff. So Mark was not actually saying anything new. He's just turned up and just saying it and going, you guys need to throw the King James away because it's old. And it's like, no, you shouldn't have to do anything like that. And the thing is, it's disingenuous. He's been working for Logos selling new Bibles, then Crossway selling new Bibles. He's got a bias against the King James, so he pretends that he's just concerned about the plowboy and all that. But the thing is, the last major revision by the Church of England, 1881 with Westcott and Hort, they deceived everyone by sneaking in this never seen before Greek text, the Westcott and Hort text. And so basically we still got that around today in the NA 28. It's still basically the Westcott and Hort text, just with a few emendations. But we just don't trust that people are doing the right thing by the general public, because we see so many mistranslations, so many errors, mistakes, and just even outright lies. Like some of the like the translation committee for the MEV, that they're like, oh, we've got 47 translators, and then they make errors that show you that they didn't even go to the original languages. They didn't even go to the Hebrew. They just updated English. And there's an error like in Isaiah 58 verse 8, where they had reward. That's how it's spelled. It's actually just pronounced reward. But they thought it said reward. So they have that reading there. Now, it's been a misprint in some of the King James editions because it's spelled R-E reward. Okay, but it just means a rear guard. So most of the modern Bibles just have rear guard. They have reward there, which proves they didn't go to the Hebrew. They're not even translating the Bible. You know what I mean? The 47 translator thing is just a load of rubbish. It's just there for sales. And so we're seeing this. We know Thomas Nelson, when Benny Hinn came along with his heretical book, Good Morning, Holy Spirit, that has deceived millions and millions and millions of people across the world and given him like unlimited resources. They knew that it was a heretical book, but they still published it in the 1990s. Thomas Nelson, HarperCollins, owned by News Corporation, Rupert Murdoch. Obviously, he's retired now, but his son James, we know all about the gossip about they're like the Kardashians are here in Australia, sort of thing. The Murdoch family, and he spying on people, him putting in prime ministers. I dare say that he puts in presidents as well. Now, owns Fox. But anyway, I'm sort of just waffling on here. Let's just continue on. Master Pastor Evening All, Calvin Tread with Fire Clemens. Oh, have you changed your name to Tread with Fire, or Tried with Fire? Sorry. The word belief is non-existent from James White's Laughing Out Loud 5 points of 5 points only. Yeah, it's like the 5 points of Calvinism, 5 points of onlyism. I wonder what or if James White believes anything other than believing the KJV equals Nazism. Well, basically, you've got the pox. It's sort of like 5 different people who have got AIDS. Imagine like in the 1980s when they just discovered AIDS and they're misdiagnosing people all around the place. It's like You kiss someone on the lips, you got the AIDS. You drank from the same glass of water, you got the AIDS. You get, yeah, and that's sort of like these categories. It's like everyone's got it. you just have to walk past the bookshop and look at a King James and go, oh, I like that. It's like, and then all of a sudden you've got a dark cloud above you, and Ruckman speaking, your demon is speaking in your ear, and you're like, oh no, I got the pox. Ben Johnson said, do you ever deal with James White's arguments? First time watching your channel, and your Hitler comparisons are exhausting and not very intelligent. Sorry, Ben. I can't please everyone. And so there's probably other channels that you would enjoy. You probably enjoy listening to James White. But, I mean, the Hitler comparison, I mean, I have to compare it to something. And if I'm getting I've debated people. TurretinFan, he's not a King James onlyist. But according to this, he is a King James onlyist. So it's like saying all Germans are Nazis. It's like saying all whites are racist. That's trying to bring it into a parallel that people in this generation can understand. And so I don't know if you don't understand the parallel, but I do. Most other people do. Most other people understand what I'm talking about. But maybe if you hung around, you might learn a few things. And the way that we speak, because we speak in a different way. I'm from Australia. You're from wherever. So bold as a lion, Ben Johnson, look under Nick's playlist. Yeah, this is like the 9th video, and I'm only up to like page 80 in his book. Ben Johnson, I think I'll pass. That was a really bad categorization of Ward. Okay, so I understand that so it looks like he's leaving. But it's like, people say this, like, I'm offended, I'm leaving, and all this. It's like, no, show me exactly what I've done wrong. And prove to me that what I'm saying is a lie or slander or just vitriolic or just out of anger. Or have I got a good point? If I have a valid point, it needs to be addressed. And so this is the problem. We're dealing with a generation of Karens who you used to be able to say, hey, 1 + 1 doesn't equal 3. Without people getting upset. But now people get all upset, and they're all, how dare you say this? And, I'm a good Christian. I've got my beautiful family and my beautiful car and my beautiful wife. And, I'm a deacon and all this. And it's like, well, none of that matters. Well, you could be the best Christian in the world. You could be, John or Peter, and still turn around and say, hey, Jesus, this and that. And he says, hey, get behind me, Satan. You know what I mean? Like, if I'm just saying, hey, guys, get behind me, Mark, you're saying this wrong. Oh, and it's a big cry session. And it doesn't look good for people to be coming on the channel and just going, oh, you've misrepresented Mark Ward, and not actually showing where. Please show. I'm begging you to critique what I'm saying. I'm begging Mark Ward to actually show where what I'm saying is hatred. Because Jesus was always doing everything perfectly. Okay, we understand that. We're like, Jesus, he's the model we need to. What would Jesus do? We wear the bracelets and everything. What would Jesus? Let's follow Jesus. He didn't do anything wrong. But then when it comes to Matthew 23, it's like, oh, well, that was a different scenario. No, he perfectly rebuked the hypocritical, the liars, the people who were two-faced, the people who were doing things out of selfish, ulterior motives and all the rest of it. He perfectly rebuked it. And so my model of rebuke is from Matthew 23. I'm just being like Jesus. It's like, okay, what would Jesus do? It's like, oh, Jesus would hold a lamb and hug a child. And it's like, well, yeah, have you ever read Matthew 23? And people like I've actually been accused by people as being the Matthew 23 guy. And oftentimes I'm just there going, well, what have I actually said but just the facts? Like if we were just debating about mathematics, it's like, well, no, that's not the answer. This is the answer. And they're upset. And it's like, you shouldn't be upset. Like, please tell me where I'm wrong. I beg people, tell me where I'm wrong. I'll change. I'll do a whole program. I'll do a 10-hour program on it and saying where I'm wrong and prove that I was wrong, But most of the time, it's the tone police. Well, that wasn't very nice. But like, okay, so Mark Ward can get on a program and say, why does Nick Sayers hate me so much? He's so full of vitriol. And it's like, what? Where have I said that I hate you? No, you must distance yourself from your argument. I mean, I hate evolution, but I tell people who are atheists and people who believe in evolution, even Christians who believe in theistic evolution, I love them. I want them to change. But that doesn't mean I'm going to compromise and just go, well, it's all lovely. And, half the time what I find is these people, I don't want to sound like a new IFB guy, like, you've got to be out there soul winning and all this rubbish. But it's like, the truth is, when you go out and you mix with people who are not saved and you face to face with them and you're telling them, hey, I believe in the Bible, and they're saying, well, I believe in aliens, or I believe in Krishna, or I believe in Islam, or I believe in Jehovah's Witness, or I believe nothing, you're showing respect, but you're still arguing, you're still debating. And usually when you're face to face, they can sense that you have love for them, you care for them. You're not just there just slap them in the face and tell them they're an idiot. You want to win them over. And so, but sometimes you can't see that through a video, or you can't see it online, just in quotations and things like that, and a chat. But at the end of the day, I mean, just harden up a little bit. Anyway, that's my 5 cents. So Ben Johnson's like, good luck with your channel. Thanks, Ben. Boulders Alliance says you should remain and engage your bias. Yes, but I don't want to say every critical text person does that, because obviously people like TurretinFan, I always use him as an example because he's a very good example. He doesn't let things personally get to him. He's just like, okay, well, here's what I think, and I mightn't agree with him, but at least we can discuss it and move on and discuss something else. Not like I'm like a teenage girl, slamming the door, like, I'm never going to talk to you again, and I'm going to jump off a bridge. And it's like, really, come on, let's just be a bit mature about this. Shall Stand Forever says Mark Ward is given too much leeway when framing arguments. He says the KJV is tantamount to a foreign language. Then he redefines what true false friends are as true ones exist across languages. Yeah, and I know he pointed out recently about David Crystal saying that false friends can exist in just English. But see, it's not really even about that definition of false friends, because false friends, obviously, it's been taken from languages like we might you might say something in like Swedish, but it's a swear word here. It just means the end. If you want to search for that word, and it's like, never say that to a girl. But I remember reading a storybook, and I was at someone's house, and the lady, she was Swedish, and I was just reading one of the kids a storybook, and at the end it just had this swear word, and I was like, and she said, that means the end in our language. I'm like, oh, that's heavy, but it's a false friend, obviously. But see, what Mark's sort of like, well, these things do exist in English. Well, that's not really the point. The point is, you're saying that text issues are unimportant. He's saying that if you delete say 40 or 50 words, it doesn't matter. But if you have one word that's a little bit out of whack and you don't understand it properly, that matters hugely, and you got to get rid of the King James. And so he's just not. He doesn't have fair weights and a just balance there. But yeah, thanks for that quote. Check his channel, Boulders Line. It's a joke, and he's got 7 subscribers. Meanwhile, hatefully, his comments after the big debate prove he was not as much as a KJV guy as was sold to us. Yeah, I mean, he's sort of like Lucifer is a mistranslation sort of thing. I noticed he was a little bit loose with some facts, like he was saying that the Gomez Bible had, I think it was fantasia or something, some word. He was just sort of making up stuff, and people came out and said, hey, that's not even true. and he was sort of demonizing the Gomez edition. See, what some people do is they read criticisms, and that, like, see, I always encourage people to read criticisms. Now, I was thinking about it the other day that I've got to be careful about saying that. When I first got saved, I had Jehovah's Witnesses come around 100 times in the first year of my salvation, knocking on my door, giving me Watchtower articles against the Trinity and all that. But see, the thing was, I wasn't just reading them and going, oh, that must be true. I was reading them and going, hang on, let's look at an alternative. And so it just so happens that the most liberal bookshop in town, the ABC, it's like BBC, British Broadcasting Company. This is the Australian Broadcasting Company. They used to have a shop here. They had a book called The Unity of the Godhead. Now, some of the concepts might have been a little bit modalistic, but because each thing had 30 aspects of God, they just had a triangle with Father, Son, and Spirit, and in the middle was God. Okay, so it didn't have the not is, concept. Okay. So it's sort of simplistic, but it showed me enough to get away from the Jehovah's Witness stuff. And so I'm going through their material, then I'm looking through this book. It was very helpful at the time. And I actually wrote to the guy and said, man, this book's amazing. I found it in this bookshop. And he just said, yeah, he'd been praying that God would put that book into the hands of people who needed it. And then after that, I became fascinated in the Trinity and was studying it. And the more that I read their material, and then I read the Bible, and then I was reading books and helps and things like that, I just got to the stage where it was like, people could give me any one of their articles and I'd read through it and I'd be able to debunk it. And so this is like in the first year of my Christianity. See, what some people do is they listen to James White do a show and they never look into what he's saying. They just think everything that he's saying is true. And sometimes especially, 8 years ago, I used to go through James White's programs because he used to often talk about text criticism. I think he's just given that away. He's just over it. But I would go through his program and go, oh, no, that's wrong. Or let's fact check this. No, that's wrong. No, that's... And there was so much wrong. And sometimes I'm like, I think I got that concept from James White, listening to something he said 10 years ago. And so I'd have to check myself and make sure that I'm not just believing whatever's being said. And what I find is some people just believe what Mark Ward's saying. Even on our side, they're like, well, that's what I found with Dan Hafley. He just seems to be parroting stuff that's like contra argument, where he's never gone, okay, let's get that argument and let's see what everyone else is saying about it. Because when I've listened to people push back a little bit, he doesn't seem to know much, or doesn't seem to go, well, yeah, I read through this guy's article and I thought about this, I thought about that. He's just gone, no, I think it's a mistake. And I just found it pretty weak. And so, yeah, definitely a lot of people have been disappointed in Hafley's material or his debate. There are some things that were fantastic. There are other things that were very weak. I think Phil Stringer would be a much better opponent. But at the end of the day, there are some things that he brought up that, true, King James onlyists were not happy because he just went to the Greek, But then there's us who are TR, KJV guys. And we're just sort of looking at it going, okay, he's made some good arguments, but he's basically saying that the King James has all these errors in it. And it's like, really? And some of the things that were studied out, he's studying certain things of Mark Ward. It doesn't take much to just, jump into our realm and find out that, some of the things that he was saying in the debate that he agrees with Mark Ward on. It's like, no, you don't have to agree with everything. Just because he says something and does a study online, it doesn't make him right. You got to listen to all the contras. You got to listen to the for and the against, and then weigh it up. You can't just listen to someone and be influenced by that and go, yeah, he's right. And this really annoys me at times when people do that. People are like, well, I'm King James only or whatever, I'm TR only. And then someone just comes along and says a tiny little thing and they just run with it. And it's like, have you ever considered this or read this or thought about this? And oftentimes they're just like, no, I'm thinking that way from forevermore. Anyway, so yeah, lots of people have been disappointed in Hafley's, I guess, discreditation. Probably the most common thing was the Lucifer concept. But yeah, definitely saying the Gomez Bible, had all mistranslation, like strange mistranslations in them. And then he was proven wrong about that. It's like, you got to make accurate critiques about things. But then again, I've made mistakes where I actually thought that the Persian Bible that was done by Punam, was it Punam? I can't remember his name. Hang on, let's look up Farsi Bible. Facebook. Now, he recently just had his YouTube and his Rumble deleted. So that's pretty full on. But I actually accused him of not translating Revelation 16:5 and saying, because at one stage I thought that the Trinitarian Bible Society, because there was one Bible that they had brought out that didn't have Revelation 16:5 reading of shall be in it. It just had holy. And I was like, hang on, if you're either following the TR or you're not. And so I sort of pulled him over the coals a little bit. And he said, no, I've translated that properly. So I checked it out and I was like, yeah, sorry, dude, I'm wrong. I thought the Trinitarian Bible Society was getting more and more lukewarm. But they do seem to be getting a bit tighter, especially with people like Christian McShaffrey, Jeff Riddle, and others being involved with him. I think it's great. So anyway, so Calvin says the tried with fire handle comes from 1 Peter 1:7, and I've had it since 2010, but YouTube only sometimes puts it up when online. It started to appear again about 2 weeks ago. Okay, that's weird. YouTube is constantly deleting my comments and messes with me all the time. They hate the truth. Nick wouldn't offer his book and ask for feedback if he hated his critics. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I would just say, stay away from Mark Ward. I'm like, the thing is, I don't know anyone else who's constantly saying, hey, prove me wrong. I know some pastors do that. They're like, they get up there and like, if I'm saying anything wrong, let me know. But I'm serious. I'm like, please show me. I want, if I am wrong in a place, I want to be schooled. Hi, by the way, Calvin. Okay, his video was a live stream 3 months ago. It has 2 views. Okay, so. Just going through these comments. Man, that's sad. I can't turn the power off to my house and get 2 views. I can turn the power off to my house and get 2 views, yeah. Every time I hear the phrase false friends, it makes me think it really means real enemy. And in Mark Ward's world, it probably does. False friends. So yeah, people are just chatting in the chat there. I'm just trying to catch up. So eagerly awaiting Pastor Brett and Nick Sayers' debate on eternal security, and we'll be praying for Philip Hillybilly with 5 9s, a brother in a really bad shape and in hospital. Nate's his name. Please pray. Okay, we'll pray for Nate. So remember everyone to pray for Nate in hospital there. Okay, so I've just caught up with the questions and comments. Let's read through this. Westcott and Hort. Okay, have a sip of this. So remember, this is a critique of James White's book from a guy probably in about the 2000s. He's had a lot of good things to say. Now, he does mention Ruckman and Ripplinger, who I don't agree with. But that doesn't make his argument invalid either. Because some people have just followed them, and then they're like, oh, actually, these guys are weird, and then they move away from them. So obviously, I don't agree with it. His comments about Westcott and Hort, so James White's comments about Westcott and Hort in the end notes of chapter 5, page 122. So that will show us whether he's got the old edition or not. 122. No, completely different. So he's got the original 1995. So this might even be a 90s article. So by the time I get to the end of critiquing this, I'm going to have read lots and lots of stuff online, stuff I agree with, stuff I don't agree with. The end notes of chapter 5 give the reader the impression that he thinks their theories are still valid. He does not tell the reader of the statements made in the 26th edition of the Nestle Aland that have a different view. Similarly, the idea of a neutral text has been retired. Neither Codex Vaticanus or Codex Sinaiticus or even P75 of 200 years earlier can provide a guideline we can normally depend on for determining the text. The age of Westcott and Hort and Tischendorf is definitely over. So that's a quotation from Nestle Aland. So the 26th edition says, similarly, the idea of a neutral text has been retired. And so oftentimes you'll hear James White using old argumentation, but then he'll scold people for not being schooled up on the CBGM and all the rest of it. Neither Codex Vaticanus or Codex Sinaiticus or even P75 of 200 years earlier can provide a guideline we can normally depend on for determining the text. The age of Westcott and Hort and Tischendorf is definitely over. So that's what they were saying in the Nestle Aland text. So the 26th edition, I think that was retired in the 90s. And then they brought out another one in 2013 or 2012. Okay, so that's the Novum Testamentum Graece, Nestle Aland Deutsche Bible Stiftung, Stuttgart, page 43. So much for Westcott. This is a quote. Westcott and Hort correctly identified the need to examine the relationships of manuscripts and demonstrated that it is simply not enough to count manuscripts, but instead to weigh manuscripts. So basically, this guy's pointing out that James White has old argumentation that he's using, that even people who were compiling the Nestle Aland text wouldn't use, that they didn't use these old arguments anymore. Because basically Westcott and Hort had a whole conspiracy theory, I'll call it, of the Lucianic recension that was debunked only like 20 or 30 years later. And the papyri showing a lot of Byzantine readings. There shouldn't have even been one Byzantine reading in the papyri, but there were lots. And this disproved the theories of Westcott and Hort. And so their whole basis for amending the text was destroyed. And but they're sort of like, well, we've already amended the text. Let's just keep doing updates to it and just tweak it here and there, because we've already gotten rid of that horrible Textus Receptus, And so the whole thing was based upon deception and error. And James White's like, yeah, Westcott and Hort, they did this and they did that. Yeah, but it was wrong. They were wrong. And even the scholars who have come later on are like, yeah, Westcott and Hort, they blundered and got it wrong and believed in strange things like a Lucianic recension. And, and James White's like, they identified the need to examine the relationships of manuscripts, the whole coherence method, and the whole concept of a neutral text. So the Nestle Aland Committee doesn't weigh manuscripts anymore, Mr. White. Where have you been? So that's interesting. Okay. Good morning, Nick. Great job, brother. From Hilly Billy. Calvin says, making a cup of Java. Being from South Florida, it's called Cuban coffee, or in Spanish cafe, con leche, which translates to coffee with milk. BBS. Be back soon. Cafe, coffee, con with leche. Green. And so then it has a topic here of Peter Ruckman. And as I've mentioned, I have to do 700 caveats to say I don't agree with Ruckman. I think he's racist. He says I'm mentally sick because I didn't marry a white person. White is guilty of the worst misrepresentation regarding Dr. Ruckman. He uses only 7 of Dr. Ruckman's books to support his attacks on him. Well, that's quite a lot. 7 books is a lot, yeah. And then is very selective on what he gives. Okay. So I'm not sure about this section, but he does have this section of Ruckman. If this is all Dr. Ruckman ever said, then we may have no reason to doubt him. But as White frequently does, there is much more to the man and his books than we would be led to believe. White quotes from Dr. Ruckman's book, Custer's Last Stand, and gives the reader some places where Ruckman was being mean and nasty to Custer and other scholars. The problem with his quotes is that he does not give any of the material in the book that is valid. He leaves the reader with the impression that all Ruckman could do was call people names without any logical evidence to support his views. Below are some quotes from the book that White did not give. You will see that the book is not quite what White makes it appear to be, and in fact has damaging evidence that neither White or Custer will talk about. Under the family classification hoax, page 21, we read, so it looks like this. Okay, so we'll just read through this. We have reconstructed text types and families and subfamilies. The we is a reference to the vast majority of conservative scholars. But when we have found that a particular manuscript would not fit into any of our nicely constructed schemes, we have thrown up our hands and said it contained a mixed text. And so that's M.M. Parvis, The Nature and Task of New Testament Textual Criticism, 1952, Journal of Religion, 22. Then it says, rather than lining up in clear streams or text types as objectively defined entities, the earliest manuscripts are dotted helter-skelter over a wide spectrum of variations, as Wilbur Pickering, The Identity of the New Testament Text, 1977, page 57. That's that one there. I'll just see if on page 57 that's what it says. I think I've got the revised edition, so it might be a bit different. Yeah, it looks like the page number is different, but that's fine. So under so-called late readings of the Byzantine Receptus, page 24, we read, Miller figures represent precisely what he claimed that they represent. The true state of the case is that the traditional text, Byzantine, receives more support from the early church fathers than does the critical text. Essentially, Westcott and Hort used by the English revisers, says Pickering again. Under the heretical and heterodox nature of the so-called family of Alexandrian manuscripts, pages 25 to 26, we read, the impurity of the text exhibited by codices B and Aleph is not a matter of opinion, but a matter of fact. Burgon, the Revision Revised, page 315. These are two of the least trustworthy documents in existence, by far the foulest text that has ever seen the light. And then under that derived text that came from conflated readings, pages 32 to 33, we read, the Western family, so this is Custer, page 10. So he's mentioning the Western family, conflates in John 5:37, and the Alexandrian family conflates in Colossians 1:12 and 2 Thessalonians 3:4. Who didn't know that the Western text again conflates neutral and Syrian reading in Matthew 4:13, John 5:37, and Acts 10:48? while Vaticanus conflates in Mark 1:28, Mark 1:40, and John 7:38. So what is quite amusing is that White accuses Gail Ripplinger of doing something in chapter 5 that he does to Dr. Ruckman in the same chapter. After following some problems with Ripplinger's book, he writes that Ripplinger makes Westcott and Hort look bad by some things they wrote. And that, so this is White, she is attempting to vilify Westcott and Hort and to destroy any last vestige of credibility these men might have in her reader's mind. Okay, so that's what James White apparently was doing. It doesn't take much, though, with Ruckman and Ripplinger. They are pretty low-hanging fruit. White then proceeds to quote Dr. Ruckman, page 109 to 121, but only gives quotes that put Dr. Ruckman in a bad light. Well, I mean, I would say, like, if I was going to spend my time, or I've even done that with my Revelation 16:5 book, I didn't put all the quotations of James White, saying correct things. Obviously, I'm pointing out where he's in error. So I would disagree with this. I mean, Ruckman does say some pretty outlandish things. I've got a list on my website of racist quotes that he said, even about people like me who don't marry white people, hasn't married a white person. I'm mentally sick. That's what he calls me. So I have that quote, but I don't have other quotes, that are positive that maybe he might say about me or whatever, because that one seems to override everything. So yeah, I would be in a little bit of disagreement with that. Sometimes you just got to point out where the problem is and deal with it. If someone's got a big cancer in their throat, well, it doesn't matter how much how muscly their legs are, they're going to die. So you're pointing out their problem. You're saying, look, there's a problem here. You don't get an X-ray and say, wow, that your ribs are amazing. When there's a huge big goiter or something on your chest. Avoiding any documented evidence that contradicts his views. And I know White does that. He's done that with me. He is basically vilifying Dr. Ruckman to his reader to destroy Dr. Ruckman's credibility. The man is a hypocrite. Now, one thing I've noticed is James White, when he wrote his book, straight away he had opposition from people like Ripplinger, Peter Ruckman, Texe Marrs, and then there were other people who were more moderate, like D.A. Waite. But even when he's doing a phone conversation with D.A. Waite, they allow a phone call from Texe Marrs to come through. And D.A. Waite and Texe Marrs would not be in agreement. But it's like, oh, you guys are on the same team sort of thing. But see, what you see is James White has sort of gone down, and it's a bit like, he's got a hammer in his hand. He's fighting against the Ruckmans. Everything's a nail. And then later on, people who have a really good argument, people like, Theodore Letus or, Jeff Riddle, or I think I've had some very good arguments against James White's position. And he treats you like Ruckman. He's just there hammering away at you. And you're like, can't we talk about this? And he's like blocks you and, and misrepresents you. And this is just what he does. So this is going back in the day where, he's dealing with people like Ruckman. And then he's basically saying everyone's a Ruckmanite, and that's exactly what he does with his categorization of the 5 types of King James only in this book. Everyone's a Ruckmanite. Everyone's a King James only. So White makes scores of statements without proof. He not only does this in the body of his work, but also does it in his reference section at the end of each chapter. Anyone really seeking truth would not be so sloppy. When reading each paragraph, I would constantly ask, says who? A case in point can be found in chapter 3 of his book. In this chapter, White gives us an overview of Greek and Hebrew, and then an overview of textual criticism. He explains details about Greek and Hebrew that have no support to them, pages 20 to 21. We are supposed to just believe him, I guess. I will go to each chapter section of this book and list 3 statements that he made that he does not support. I realize that this will be lengthy, but it is needed to prove my point. So, introduction. So this is part of James White's book. The sales clerk never saw it coming. He just finished packing the new shipment of study Bibles and setting up the new display. He had been working at the Christian bookshop only a week. All seemed well, and then it happened. She seemed like any other lady looking for a Bible for her grandson. I would like a real Bible, she says. The Bible God honors, the King James, the AV 1611. Scenes like this are repeated almost daily across the English-speaking world. Responsibility must be laid at the door of the KJV-only camp for the destruction of many Christian churches. So here we have this story, this guy, he's been there a week in the Christian bookshop and he's just loving the Lord and listening to Keith Green and, he's just an innocent guy, butter wouldn't melt in his mouth. And then this religious psycho woman turns up and is like, I want a real Bible, not your rubbish. And then, he's like, oh, what's going on? But it's kind of like, what would be a good example of something other than like a Bible? Like you're going somewhere to buy, you do that with any product. Okay. Some products are more superior than others. If you're going to buy a vacuum cleaner, like here in Australia, you go to anyone's house who's got a lot of money and they usually have a Dyson. Okay. So Dysons are the ones that they're portable. So you charge it. I think they're horrible because they've got this see-through top on it. So you can always see it's full of rubbish unless they clean it every time, which most people don't. But you get a Dyson. Okay, that's what you get. Now, if you were to go through and look at Google reviews and everything, that's what smart people do is they try and work out the best quality vacuum for their money. You don't just go and buy something that's got a 1-star rating. It's going to break in a year's time. And going through and looking for the Bible that you want, obviously this is written in 1995. So someone going to a bookshop and saying, yeah, I would like a real Bible. What do you want, an NASB? Do you want a Bible with a whole bunch of words missing? So of course, any product that you buy, like you think of anything, a car, a house, anything, even things of small value. Like if I offered you 4 things that were like just cups, okay, but I had a review on it and one of them had 5 stars and the other one had 3, like the handle breaks off, you're going to say I want the 5-star one. So what's wrong with going to a place where they're selling things and saying, hey, I want the best one, I don't want rubbish? And the sales clerk's like, oh no, and he's been a Christian a week, so he knows nothing. This example is just ridiculous. But and then it's like, scenes like this are repeated almost daily across the English-speaking world. Well, if you hadn't given us a whole bunch of Bibles that are rubbish, we wouldn't have this problem. So it's like going to the fruit shop and you're like, look, I want the genuine apples, the ones we used to eat when, just 5 years ago, you had all these really nice apples. Now I bite into them. They're all doughy. This one's unripe. This one's not. I want the good one. Where are the good ones? And it's like, you can't ask that question. It's like, oh, why not? Well, they're all good ones. It's like, so being a Christian means what? You shut your brain off? No, even people on YouTube do, which Bible's the best, and they'll tell you, oh, the NIV is the best for, oh, this one's good for formal equivalence, this one's good for dynamic equivalent. Even they're making categorizations. But if a King James person comes along and says, look, I just want the tried, true, tested King James, that's what I want. I want a real Bible. You're in a cult. You're causing problems and you're splitting churches left, right, and center. Not are these groups that are bringing out these Bibles with thousands of words missing, with complete verses just gone. you memorize it all your life, and then you go to your favorite verse, and it's, oh, that's not even in there. Oops. So you're like, oh, I want the real one. No, you're a religious kooky freak, and that's the end of that. So he's going to go through these chapters and tell you where this type of problem is. I'll go through some of these comments so I don't get too far behind. Okay. Hilly Billy says, my roommate in flight school was Spanish. I know just enough to get in trouble. So these guys are talking about Spanish coffee. Hilly Billy says, laughing out loud, wow, I had no idea how much damage I had been doing by using the King James Version. If you use that King James Version, you are in a cult. You should be ashamed of yourself. You are splitting churches. You are splitting churches, Okay. So Avery F says, Bible Highlighter says the King James Version and TR stands above the rest. Yes. And Westcott and Hort are Catholic Bibles. Well, the Nestle Aland 27th edition clearly says they're in league with the Vatican with Bible translation projects and things like that. 1 Corinthians 11:18 King James Version says, first of all, when you come together in the church, it sounds like they had a meeting place. Okay, so someone earlier said that they didn't have churches in the Bible. Well, I mean, the word church just means a house of the Lord. So obviously, to meet in someone's house when you've got lots and lots of people, there's nothing wrong with building a building and saying, we'll go there. There's nothing wrong with that. 1 Corinthians 1:10 says we're all to speak the same thing. That's not possible in the modern version movement. Yeah, you go to a verse and it's not there. But apparently that doesn't matter. Mark Ward's like, that doesn't matter. What matters is a word that you can't understand. You have to look up. Well, you don't know that you don't know. It's like, well, what if you don't know that it's missing? And I've thought of doing a whole series on, words that you didn't know that you don't know are missing. Or words that words in the Bible that have been redefined and you didn't know that they had been redefined to something you don't know, or something like that. And just sort of doing a bit of a parody of Mark Watt and just going through and showing where these new Bibles have, like words like monogenes. It means unique now. It didn't back then, but it does now. It's like, why did all of a sudden the change, Why all of a sudden from unicorn, rhinoceros, this type of thing, to a bull, why has that changed? And there's so many things in the Bible that you can look at that have been changed. And people are reading along and it's like, oh, I didn't know that was changed, in the NIV or the ESV or whatever, choose your acronym. But I mean, do I want to focus on Mark Ward forever? I want to move on to more important, because it's, the thing is, Mark Ward is low hanging fruit. It gets so tiring dealing with, he said, she said, I'm offended, sort of stuff. I'd rather deal with academic stuff and theological stuff. Calvin says, I went to a Ruckmanite church for almost 1 year and met Ruckman in 11. But had to leave because of doctrinal differences on the gap theory, for which the answers fell scripturally short and other doctrinal reasons. Okay, that's very interesting. Bible Highlighter says, I've increased my list of Catholic changes in modern Bibles to 25 now. Okay, very interesting. I'm a filthy heathen. Okay, thanks for reminding us that, Hillbilly. I've lost the context of that, but I think you're a saved saint. It really rubs me the wrong way when Mark Ward keeps attacking the Bible, KJV. He is now attacking idioms like the apple of his... Yeah, I mean, people know the apple of your eye is the thing inside that looks like an apple, it's just, you know, what's the focus, what's right there, you know, in a sense. And like trying to make out that an idiom is a false friend. I don't know. Nick, you should start a video series called Words You Don't Know You're Missing. Yeah, I should. But it's sort of like, it's doing Mark Ward videos. Like he's bringing out a video like every 2 or 3 days now, you know, with different people and all the rest of it. And I'm watching him and listening, and I'm like, I've gone over this 100 times, and I'm like, man, I'm exhausted from doing it, because it's just so easily debunked. I've sort of said everything I really need to say, but and I guess in a way I'm just tired of you know, listening to what Mark Ward has to say. But perhaps, you know, that's one of the things, is usually there's no one else doing something like that. And sometimes that can really change people's minds. It's like, okay, well, Mark Ward says that this is unimportant. Let's look at this. Is this important or isn't it? You know, let's look at a word that's changed, like, you know, firstborn, Matthew chapter 1, and just. But I could go through that. That, like, if I did a series on that, I would be there for 10 years. There's so much missing in the modern versions, and it's sort of like, well, how far do you go? And I really want to move on to some more academic stuff, you know, rather than just sort of like, hey, Mark Ward's wrong again. You know, Mark's war on words, yeah. Need to pray for him big time. Mark Ward is a great guy. If you take time to actually listen to his arguments, he's not attacking the Bible at all. Okay, well, if you go through my videos, I've probably done maybe 50 videos about Mark Ward. So I am listening to what he has to say. It's just most other people are not listening. They're just glossing over all the strange and weird things that he's saying, and just believing his conclusion, where he's saying a lot of false things. So in his description of the apple of the eye video, it literally says incredibly minor false friend. Yeah, but a lot of his false friends are not false friends at all. He has just gotten the new version interpretation of what they think it says, and he's turned around and said that's a false friend. And so say there's something like unicorn, which is a rhinoceros. Even the King James had a marginal note saying all rhinocerots. It's a one-horned animal. You could say, well, that's a false friend. It should have been a wild ox or whatever. There's plenty of things people have their own personal opinion on, but many times they haven't studied these things to the nth degree. Mark Ward, sometimes you can tell he's just done a study on it that morning, or someone just contacted him yesterday and he's got a bee in his bonnet. So Nell says it's not his interpretation. He's using the Oxford English Dictionary. Yeah, but the Oxford English Dictionary in many places is wrong. I mean, just look up the word Easter. It says it's a pagan holiday. I've done so much work on that, proving that it's not a pagan holiday since 2005. I've been saying that. David Crystal helped me with my first article. So the world-leading expert on the English language, and he said it was a good article. He agreed with my conclusions that Easter is a Christian festival. It's not a pagan festival. But the Oxford English Dictionary says that. The Oxford English Dictionary also says that 1611, it should read Passover in Acts chapter 12, verse 4, because of the trend that Tyndale started, where my whole case has been, by the time 1611 came around, they correctly put in Easter, meaning the resurrection, because from then you can see the usage is resurrection. Usually when people are quoting things in the just in the Reformation period, or even just in the latter 16th century with the post-Reformation material, sure, they're still using it like the bishops in Geneva and things like that. But later on, Easter became known as the celebration of the resurrection, just like we do believe today. There was no other shift in time. 1611 nailed it. They put it in its correct semantic range. And so Oxford English Dictionary can be wrong. I've just pointed out clearly that the whole thing of study, spedauzo, in a philosophical concept, spedauzo always means study. Now, when you're talking about having diligence, like, lifting heavy furniture or running or doing things physically, yes, spedauzo means to be diligent in those things. But when it's talking about something philosophical, like in that verse where it says, study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed. And it says rightly dividing the word of truth. So that's getting the word of God and studying it. So it's a philosophical concept. Spedauzo means to study in that particular instance. So it's, yes, spedauzo can mean diligence in other instances, but Mark Ward is just simply wrong on this. And even modern Greek, if you want to do further learning in a university or a college, a university is called spedauzo. it's like you can't make this stuff up. But Mark Ward is just so wrong on these things, but just keeps sort of hitting the table harder. And it's like, it doesn't matter what you're showing. And he won't listen to people like me anyway. He's just like, that guy's just angry. He's just mad on me. And it's like, no, I've got an argument. Can you deal with the argument? Rather than the tone police coming along and saying, he said it in a funny voice or, whatever. So a lot of his false friends, and the vast majority of them are just stuff that King James people have known for the last 50 years. He's just come along and stated the obvious. But other things he's doubled down on. I mean, D.A. Waite has be diligent in the margin of his defined King James Bible. That's what the lexical meaning is of spedauzo. But the contextual meaning is study, because in the context, it's talking about rightly dividing the word of truth. So there is a contextual meaning that's, usually it's like, okay, that's a broad general sort of meaning, but every word is defined in its context. In its context, it means study. So that's just one place where he's wrong. And I'll debate anyone on that. I'll debate Mark Ward on that. Just we'll do a whole debate just on the word study, but he won't do it. Avery F says he's mean in the nicest possible way. There's a term for that too. Yeah, passive aggressive. Even today, the scientific name for a one-horned rhino is Rhinoceros unicornis. Yes, that's exactly right. Boulder's Line says, are you using sarcasm, Nell? I don't think he is. But anyway, let's move on. So chapter 1 says here, I'll have a sip. Got my water here just in case. We have heard of small groups that go even further, claiming that the King James Version was written in eternity and that Abraham and Moses and the prophets all read the King James Version, including the New Testament. So, I mean, that's James White's heard of these people. And so that's the thing. Are these people King James onlyists? If you just like the TurretinFan likes the King James, he's a King James onlyist. So, there are small groups of King James onlyists, sort of, like TurretinFan, sort of not that bad at the moment, but he's pretty bad. He's already a Nazi. He's not an SS platoon leader guiding people to the gas chambers at the moment, but he has the potential to get there, sort of thing. That Nick Sayers guy, he's probably already, he's like an SS platoon leader. He's a KJ. Like the first thing James White ever said to me was, "You're a Ruckmanite." I was like, no. Anyway, that's what Mark Ward says. So these guys just love to pigeonhole you, ad hominem attack, slander. That's what they major in. That's if you want to be an apologist in the United States, just learn how to slander people. That's the first rule to be an American apologist. So obviously, who on earth has ever heard of people saying the KJV was written in eternity and Abraham and Moses and the prophets all read the King James Version? I mean, even I've heard some weird King James stuff, but I've never heard that weird. But maybe James White has, But it's pretty bizarre. One will, it is said to say, often hear more about the KJV than about the Lord Jesus from these people. Okay, so when Mark Ward is talking about the King James more than any other subject, is he off the wall? You know what I mean? Oh no, he's exposing it. Well, we're defending it. But then you got James White. He's written a book on it, and he goes around doing seminars on it, talking about it over and over and over again. So when you do it, you're wrong. When I do it, it's in a good spirit and it's correct. Amazing. Any difference between the King James Version and these translations is considered a change, is considered a change, an omission, or a deletion. If you get the modern Bibles, you look at it and it says omitted. Okay, so I'll just have a look at 1 John 5:7 in a Bible. Did I notice they had a footnote in? Okay, 1 John 5:7. Okay, so it doesn't use omitted or deleted there, but oftentimes it will just have NU omits this. So yeah, that's what the Bibles themselves say in the margins. This is omitted. The last 12 verses are omitted here. So we're just using the same language that Bibles use, and we're in trouble for that. So I guess we're not allowed to use those terms for some reason, because it's naughty, because James White just says it's bad. We have to use, I don't know, amended, or, I guess just don't even talk about it at all, or else you're obsessed, sort of thing. Chapter 2, terms such as traditional Bible texts abound in King James only literature. Yeah. The traditional text was something that was coined by Dean Burgon. Now, I know a lot of Textus Receptus people believe that Burgon was defending the Textus Receptus, but he really wasn't. He was defending the Byzantine text. He was sort of like the father of the majority text movement. So you have the traditional text, but having traditional biblical text, I mean, we have, like James White will turn around and say, we're traditionalists. We follow a tradition. We're trapped in a tradition. All this stuff. It's like, well, okay, so wouldn't we have traditional biblical texts? Why is that wrong? Because James White just doesn't like it and thinks that it's wrong. That's why. And you've just got to agree with him because he's the guru. King James Version only individuals are not generally interested in church history as a subject. Now, I've listened to enough James White. I've listened to all his history programs as well that he did in his church that he was in before he jumped in with who's that other guy? I can't remember. Jeff Durbin. And yeah, in his previous church, he did lots and lots of teachings on church history, and I listened to all of them. And so I'm not interested in church. You're generally not interested. Well, I mean, it just depends. Who are you labeling as a King James onlyist? I mean, even someone like Ruckman, he knew a lot of church history. Now, I don't agree with him, but he knew a lot. There are people, in the Baptist world in the United States who know a lot about church history, are very interested in it. But then I remember back in those days, he debated Dave Hunt over Calvinism. And Dave Hunt said, look, I really don't know that much about the reformers or what they said. I just follow the Bible. And James White actually used that as part of the beginning of his show, like, Dave Hunt saying this, like, oh, he doesn't know anything. And it's like, well, what Dave Hunt was really saying in a roundabout way was like, well, I know more about the Bible than I do about the Reformers. It doesn't mean you don't know anything about the Reformers, but he knows more about what the Bible says and is concerned about that. Because if you're like, well, Martin Luther said this and Calvin said this, and it's like, well, okay, so what? We didn't have Christianity until they came along and said these things. Surely it should just be in the Bible, you know. And so that's pretty much what he's saying. But you usually see James White will grab a quote like that and misrepresent the person. Where I found Dave Hunt did a really good job in his debate against James White. I found James White just demonized him, and that caused Dave Hunt to just sort of separate from James White after a while. It was interesting. King James only individuals are not generally interested in church history as a subject. What can you say with that? It's like, okay. Many Christians believed the Septuagint to be an inspired translation of the Hebrew Old Testament. Okay. Well, I think the thing is the Septuagint that the early church used, I think they made it and they used it, was probably way more accurate than the Septuagint that we have today, which is usually goes back to the fifth column of Origen's Hexapla. So anyway, that's a quotation. What I really want to do, this is just a bit of a reminder for myself as well. I want to go through the Septuagint conference that Jeff Riddle put on and Christian McShaffrey put on, and go through all of those videos, because I sort of feel that that came and went, and I'd hate to sort of miss the opportunity to critique it in a sense where I'm probably going to be in agreement with the vast majority of people. But it's good, like people have spent a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of study in that arena, and it would be good to highlight it and get people interested in that. So, but it's interesting because the King James Research Council, they bring out a conference every year. Then you've got, the Dean Burgon Society used to do that, but now they don't anymore. It seems like that's the King James Research Council is sort of like a dog leg sort of that group, as far as I can tell. But then you've got the Jeff Riddle Christian McShaffrey group, the Reformation Bible Society, and Reformation Text, I guess it is, Bible Society. So those guys, they're doing their own conferences. There's other groups doing conferences as well. So it would be great to go through a lot of these videos and critique them and think about them, and even just watching them and agreeing, going through like 10 minutes without even interrupting and going, yeah, I agree with all that. That's great. And just to sort of put that information out there and polish our sword, I guess, in a way. Calvin says, best idea yet held, Everson, words you don't know you're missing. That would be fantastically wonderful. KJV only individuals are not generally interested in church history. Really? Unbelievable. Yeah, this is the type of thing that James White, he will say on the Dividing Line program or in his books, and you're just like, what? Just a broad brush statement, like as if he knows the thinking of every person around the world. That KJV only individuals are not generally interested in church history as a subject is disingenuous at very best, and obviously made up bull at the worst. Yes. Hilly Billy says, I have a butt full of statistics that are on par with that one. Avery F says, I'd really appreciate your breakdown of those videos. Yeah, it would be good to sort of get away from the really low-hanging sort of Mark Ward stuff and just look at what other TR people are saying, and also put them in a bit of a spotlight, because some of these videos only get like 200 views, and it's like, man, they should be it should be stuff that's listened to by every TR person to really get up to speed with the Septuagint information, even if we're just reminding ourselves of things that we already know. So, okay, chapter 3 says, Hebrew is an ancient tongue, and as such is rather concrete in tone. And so what he's saying here, so he's saying that he explains details about Greek and Hebrew that have no support to them. We're just supposed to believe him, I guess. And then he's like, I'll go through each chapter and list 3 statements that he's made that he doesn't support. Okay, so these are unsupported claims. And that's why I guess we're all like, huh? King James people don't believe in church. They don't like church history. Okay, you know. Hebrew is an ancient tongue. Okay. It's rather concrete in tone. Whatever that means. Greek is more a technical language, a more precise language than either Hebrew or English. So, you know, this comes out of the category of just things that James White's saying that you sort of like, well, okay, have you got a footnote for that? That is, we know beyond all doubt that it was the original writings of the biblical authors in the vast majority of cases. So that is, we know beyond all doubt. So he's saying, you know, the critical text, we know. You know, it's just the sky is blue. You know, we know. Modern text critics are on par with those who push the CRT. See, that's a two-way street. Chapter 4. Even liberal scholars will admit the outstanding purity of the New Testament text and the validity of the belief in the tenacity of the text. Okay, so liberal scholars will admit New Testament. Most liberal scholars are saying New Testament text is lousy and needs fixing. It's got made up bits in it. And, some hope to gain favor with the king and advancement in their position through their work on the translation itself. So that's the 1611. Oh, they just wanted to, you know, suck up to the king. They wanted a position. Oh, yeah. So Calvin's saying critical race theory. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, they hope to gain favor with the king. So they're not real. There's no genuine person there. The only genuine person there is someone like Miles Smith, who wrote the preface, who they constantly misquote out of context all the time and go, we stand with the King James preface. But when you look at their when you look at what they're doing it for, why they're translating, well, it's just, I just want position with the king, not I want the English people to have a good Bible. And see, this is the thing. Oftentimes when people make a claim like that, they're projecting their own motives upon someone else. And so here's James White, who worked as a consultant for the NASB. Was he just hoping to gain favor with the academy and advance his position on his work on the translation itself? So he's got his name like, oh, NASB, you know, I've been a consultant on a Bible translation, you know. Is that why he did that? Because that's what he's accusing the King James guys of. It is very common for KJV only advocates to attack such men as Westcott and Hort for being baby sprinklers, yet the KJV was born in the heart of such a system of theology. I don't know anyone who's really accusing Westcott and Hort of being baby sprinklers. I know a lot of people say, well, King James guys, you know, they baptize babies and stuff like that. But see, at the end of the day, like I've heard some people say, oh, well, why would people follow an Anglican Bible translation? Why would they do that? You know, and it's like, well, when you recognize that someone has done a superior job than you go with that conclusion. You don't bucket it. if you know, Albert Einstein, you made certain scientific conclusions that you agree with, and that they seem to go well with your reality, it doesn't matter what else he said. It doesn't matter what his lifestyle was like or what his beliefs were. Truth is truth. And so if someone's done a good translation, Like, who did the Bishop's Bible? Do you know any of their testimonies whatsoever? But I'm sure you would go, yeah, well, that's a pretty decent Bible, you know. You just go with the conclusions of truth wherever you find them. And so chapter 5 has none of these scholars insisted that the KJV was it. They did not believe that the KJV was completely without error, or even the TR was infallible or inspired. No. They said it was it. They said out of many good ones, they wanted to make one principal good one. So one is monos only. So they're like, we wanted to make one singular, only, you know, one good one. So one principal good one, you know, usually the word principle, you know, these guys knew Latin, principio. It's the first, the number one. This is the, if you've got a pile of, you know, apples and you put them in order of, you know, the best ones to the most rotten ones, this is the best. And in the dedication to King James, it clearly says that out of the original languages and out of the English and out of foreign languages, they wanted to make one more exact or more perfect translation. So while the others were good, that they wanted to make a more perfect translation. So a very perfect one. But then James White comes along and says none of the scholars insisted that the KJV was it. Where's he getting this from? He's just, I don't know, pulling them out of somewhere. They did not believe that the KJV was completely without error. Okay, so they made a perfect Bible, an exact Bible, but they're like, well, it's full of errors, you know. Or that even the TR was infallible and inspired. Okay, so the bit where in the translators to the reader where they're talking about the golden pipes, and they talk about perfection of the originals. The original languages have that type of perfection, but then they talk about a perfection of a translation, which is a lesser perfection, but it's still a type of perfection. So, you know, maybe James White needs to study that. Protestants, however, should be quick to question any such notions of absolute religious certainty. Here comes that argument, you know, you can't have certainty. Yeah, they trade certainty over truth, where it's like, no, you've misrepresented that concept. The book of Proverbs clearly says that you can know the certainty of the words of truth. So you can be certain about the words of truth. If you read Revelation chapter 22, verses 18 and 19, it says, don't add or subtract from these words. How can you commit that sin if you're not certain which words are in or out? If you got like 1,000 words, you're like, I don't know if that's in or out. I'll pericope adultera. I could be right, could be wrong. Last 12 verses of Mark, I don't know, toss a coin, you know. Well, it says don't add or subtract. So just say you're there with your pen and you had to copy, and you're like, should I add it or should I subtract it? If you commit that sin, the Bible says if you take away from these words, God will take away your part from the book of life and from the holy city. Okay? It's pretty important. And so you should really know where the words are. I know where the words are. King James people, TR people know where the words of God are. Other people are like, I haven't studied that through yet. I don't know if it's genuine. Maybe they delete that verse, or maybe it's not, you know, they don't know. They're all over the place with where the word of God is. It breeds confusion. Helg says, I doubt that any liberal scholar would affirm the outstanding purity of the New Testament text. Is it 90% purity, 80% purity? Where did James White read this? Any footnotes on that? We'll see. Yeah, these are places where he just makes claims, you know. Hilly Billy says, yes, he's pulling them out of his exhaust pipe on his big van that he's cruising around in. Bold as a Lion says, you almost made me choke on a taco. Yeah. So Helg's correct here. Like, well, so this is the thing. James White's like, well, you can't have certainty. Like, look at this. Protestants, however, should be quick to question any such notion of absolute religious certainty. So you can't be certain about the text. Just 90%. That's fine. Just join with Mark Ward and the Textual Confidence Collective. Don't be absolutists. Just relax. Just take it easy and realize the Bible is full of mistakes. And so then you read the quote before. It's like, well, even liberal scholars agree. It's like, yeah, because you're the liberal scholar. There's no difference between your belief and liberal scholars, really. I mean, look at his debate with Bart Ehrman. They're not debating about, should it be Father forgive them, they know not what they do, or should it be this, should it be that. They're just debating on what it equals. Equals atheism or equals James White can still have all that Bart Ehrman has, but I'm still a believer, guys. So he goes around showing people, hey, open your Bible to this verse and it's missing. And he's like, see, it's not even there. But lucky that Bart Ehrman didn't show you that, or he would say, stop believing in God. I'm showing you that so I can say, still believe in God. And then he gets on his bus and drives off, and people are like, what was that? We got all these mistakes in the Bible? And they wonder why the whole world is filled with Bart Ehrmans, Calvin says, the book that brought about the critical race theory, as it is known today, was written by a black Muslim man named Aja Y. Martinez. No surprise there. Yeah. It is a sad thing that what I've noticed is I've got some really good friends who are Pakistani, really good friends who are Indian. But what I've noticed is there is a huge paranoia among Indians that white people hate them and are fully racist. They think we're Nazis. And we have the cricket here, and a few years ago, and one of the Indians said, hey, this guy in the crowd's yelling out, something about my race or whatever. And they actually stopped the whole game for a couple of days, did a full investigation into it, and no one else in the whole arena or anything, including microphones, everything, cameras, no one heard anything. It was just this one guy making a claim. But the thing is, if you have dark skin in this region of the world, you will be persecuted. The chances of getting married are very slim. Many times you won't be given any good type of job. And they see people like, many people see people from Africa as dirty. People who have white skin is a lot better and a lot classier. And it's just the culture. That's just the way it is. And so, but then to put on to, to come to a different culture and say, hey, you guys are racist. It's like, no. We're most Australians I know are simply just not racist. I don't meet anyone who's like, I don't like that person because they're of their race. They mightn't like someone's cooking, or mightn't like, someone's attitude or something like that, and it might equate it to culture. But racism is different to culturalism. You don't have to like every culture. You don't have to like, Aussie culture or Canadian culture or Papua New Guinean culture, but you love the people. Most people, even atheists, everyone, I don't know of any real racists. And so, anyway, careful on the choker. Yeah, there's a lot of exhaust fumes coming out in this book at the moment. That's a nasty place to be pulling things from. Indeed. Yeah, that James White bus is a short one. Yeah, and it's maybe we could say we've been thrown under the James White bus and then got covered in exhaust fumes on the way through. He's obviously just making up stuff, whatever suits his argument. Grass is not green, it's yellow and blue. Yeah. So yeah, very good point, Hilly Billy. It's he's just making stuff up. Calvin says, I don't think it's a coincidence that the word cult is in culture. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That there are certain things that people believe in their culture that override the word of God. many times, and I see that in American culture because I'm on the outside. I look in and just see it obviously. Now, there's probably a lot of things in Australian culture that Americans come here and they're like shocked at, and like, oh, you guys do that? What about what the Bible says? And it's like, oh, I don't know. We're Australians, you know, and whatever culture you go to, you see it, you know, and people oftentimes are just trying to please friends, family, and they don't even realize it can go against the Word of God. So then he's made the quote, these kinds of arguments fill the pages of Peter Ruckman's books. Well, I haven't read Peter Ruckman's books, but amazingly, I have tons of them in PDF format. So I'm going to show you some of these right now, just because I can. Now, if I go to my hard drive, hopefully they'll come up. It'll be sad if they don't. I'll just type in Ruckman. Because oftentimes I'll just find a picture and I'll save it. If I find a PDF, I'll save it. I don't care who it is. It was, yeah, here we have like, whoops, wrong grab there. Like this book here. Ruckman's Battlefield Notes. I don't even know where I got this from. But it's obviously like a Ruckman book. And so, yeah, I'd love to go through. He's talking about the Twin Towers, and I'd love to go through and just read it all and go, okay, well, that's what Ruckman thinks, you know, because I really should do that, because I mention the guy so often. I should really figure out who James White says I'm like. Apparently, I'm just like this guy. Okay, so chapter 6 says, the Bible is plain in representing the now and not yet aspect of salvation. We are saved, and yet we are being saved, and we will be saved as well. Well, I guess he's making that claim. The Bible is plain in a sense where you read about, you know, we can be born again, we can be saved. We say that I'm saved, you know. Luke, Paul says that as well. But then we are being saved in a sense of sanctification, and we will be saved. You know, he that endures unto the end shall be saved. It's talking about it can be in the rapture, but we will be saved in heaven, you know, sort of thing. But I think the concept of being saved, that sort of seems like you daily working at your salvation, being saved, you know. So anyway, my first pastor used to say that a lot. We're saved, we're being saved, and we will be saved. It was just like it's something that he'd bring up a lot. So I have thought about that quite a lot. It is in that concept of, I think it's Colossians chapter 1, maybe verse 18, where it says, you know, we who are being saved, in the New King James, where, or I guess in a lot of modern Bibles it says that, where I prefer the, you know, we who are saved, you know, we are saved, you know. So anyway, I'm not sure that that's as controversial as he's making out, but I guess if someone hasn't really thought about it that much, it's sort of like he's made that comment. Yeah, perhaps he should have put like a little asterisk and written down the bottom, you know, that his study on that or whatever. Instead, the KJV translation is rather unusual, since it borrows a phrase that is not found until verse 5 in the Greek and transposes it to verse 1. Yeah, I think that it would have the context of that, because I know what it is. It's in, I'm pretty sure it's in Romans. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's in Romans, where it has just 2 Greek words that they're like 5 verses later. But when you translate it, you sort of have to translate it in that way. Or maybe it's in Ephesians. Maybe I can sort of find it. But that will be a rabbit trail. It's like a needle in the haystack. Anyway, KJ. So yeah, that one there. Yeah, it should have a footnote. Perhaps he does have a footnote there, but you would think that in that context you wouldn't understand anything that's being said unless it's got the verse there. So, and it's true. This is exactly what happens when you're reading through the Greek New Testament. You're like, hang on, those two verses are into verse 5, but they're translated. Maybe, yeah, no. I'll just end up looking at stuff for like 20 minutes. I'll find it and go, there you go. And it's like, well, let's just move on. KJV only advocates will often attack the use of the term grave by modern translations. Okay. Well, I guess if it's to do with the omission of hell or, abode of the dead sort of concepts in the Old Testament. Anyway, I'm not really sure where that's coming from. Some of these, I just know that James White makes these type of statements. Others, I'm like, okay. But maybe he just had to sort of throw 3 in there because he's doing 3 a chapter. The majority of the King James Version only publications focus on the New Testament, and I shall follow that lead. Okay. I think that is quite true. Most people do focus on the New Testament, on the Textus Receptus. A few point out the Old Testament, but a small minority of scholars prefer the majority text approach, believing that the reading found in the majority of manuscripts has the most right to be called the original. Yeah, I would say that's what majority text people would say. That's matches up with the New King James preface. After the faith became legal at the beginning of the 4th century, more accurate methods of copying and more professional copyists helped the freeze of the reading of the text, keeping variation that was due to unprofessional scribal work down to a minimum in the centuries that followed. Okay. So I guess these are just places where apparently there's no real footnote or no real proper context, but I'm just not sure about that. I would agree with that. So anyway, chapter 8. We should also note that many conservative scholars see in this passage a dual fulfillment, one that was relevant in the day of Isaiah that did not involve a virgin birth, and the greater fulfillment in the virgin birth of Christ centuries later. Yeah, that's debatable. I wouldn't agree with White on that. I would say that the fulfillment was in Christ, and that's it. Gail Ripplinger lists as denying the deity of Christ, though no explanation is given as to how this comes from the text itself. Gail Ripplinger lists it as denying the deity of Christ. Then it says, a fact that KJV only writers do not wish to communicate in their works. So yeah, I guess he's just looking for things that are sort of like just what we would say, throwing people under the bus, and you're like, well, why? Why has that happened? What's the context of this? But it's hard to know what the context of this is when he's using the first edition. But anyway, some of these are very relevant. Some of these are like, okay, well, whatever. So I'll just quickly go through them. OG made fire good, says, or Og made fire good. I'm glad I decided to learn Koine Greek. Understanding how Greek syntax and grammar works, I can understand why God used it to reveal his son to the world. Amen. Calvin says, exactly, Nick. John MacArthur changed the word death for hell and the grave in the ESV. Not sure about the LSB. Yeah. And so, yeah. And, yeah, John MacArthur has some interesting views on death and the blood and things like that. Hilly Billy says, I'm lost on the attacks of the word grave. 2 Kings 13 talks about Elisha's grave. I think it's talking about Sheol, about grave, As bold as the lion said, be right back. So chapter 9 says, some defenders of the AV insist that all one has to do is have a good dictionary at hand and all be well when encountering such terms. Well, that's That's very true. That's a way better position than what Gail Rippling is saying of don't use anything. It's a built-in dictionary sort of thing. But at the end of the day, I would say, yeah, if you have a good dictionary, reading along with the King James, you can look up a lot of these words. So, yeah, I would say that's a true statement. Yes, he probably could have elaborated, but for example, the British mind certainly is accustomed to the saying, God save the king, but the Hebrew mind never thought of such a thing. So he's saying this is an error in the King James. Maybe I should look that one up. Maybe God save the king. Wonder if we got that there. King. NKJV. No. God. No. Maybe that might be under idiom. H-I. No. Anyway. But yeah, I would say, God save the king. Let's check it out. Let's Google it. Was God save the king? Hebrew. Okay, so it appears in 1 Samuel 10:24 and 1 Kings 1:39. Okay, so God save the king. Let's type in Hebrew. Or Israel. And okay, so God save the king. Here we are in Hebrew. Okay, so that's a modern day hymn, so that's not going to help. Cloud front. Okay, so this guy is actually pretty interesting. He does have a Ripplinger, Ruckmanite type of view, but oftentimes he's talking about things that no one else does. Sometimes he's just got Will Kinney's articles or whatever. So God save the king. God save the king and the king's name. And the people shouted, God save the king. Okay, all these versions have it. It looks like a Will Kinney article. So anyway, he's defending it. So if you want to look that up, it looks like James White's wrong on that. I would default to him being wrong, but sometimes idioms are carried across in a different way. Most people who are not committed to the King James only position will admit that the AV needs some level of revision. Most people who are not committed to the King James only position will admit that the AV needs some level of revision. Well, I think had Westcott and Hort just updated spelling and things like that, people would have been fine with that. But they didn't. They snuck in and never seen before Greek text and basically destroyed it. So I think the trust level is just gone. Chapter 10, but God bless the Septuagint too and the Vulgate. And so that's assuming that we have the Septuagint, which even the King James translators felt that we probably didn't. Like William Whitaker, he said that what we have today is a mess compared to the Septuagint that was talked about by the early church writers, that it was akin to the Hebrew. And then the Vulgate. So there are certain claims on the Septuagint and the Vulgate. Oh, these are perfect by certain people. And so then when you get something that is perfectly translated, then they're like, well, see, these other groups or these other people are saying the same thing. So it's a bit like saying, well, you claim you've got good theology. Well, the Jehovah's Witnesses also claim that, And it's like, yeah, but they're a cult. we can look at what the Septuagint is today and go, well, it's full of mistakes. Methuselah didn't live 14 years after the flood, and the Vulgate's got problems, and but we can say that that the King James is correct. And so usually false views are going to say that they are the true view. That's what happens in all cults and isms, and people are like holding up a book and saying this is the best. And so, but there is actually really something that's best out there. It mightn't be what that person says. So you shouldn't be demonized for actually having, like if you've got a proof coin, or if you've got 24 karat gold, and someone comes along with 9 karat gold and says, this is gold, this is pure gold, and then you test it and it's not. How can you be in trouble for their claims? You're saying, yeah, I've got the pure gold here. And it's like, yeah, everyone claims that, mate. Get with the program. And so, no, it actually is. It's pure. I'm testing it every day, and this is pure. So, no, many people have said that over the years, and they've been wrong. So you're wrong too. It's no, not everyone's just wrong because some people have been wrong. B.F. Westcott and F.J.A. Hort were not fundamentalist Baptists. Okay, well, I wouldn't say they were either. So I'm not sure why that's there. Some defenders of the AV 1611 would like to think that it is just what modern scholars believe, but such is utterly untrue. Some defenders of the 1611 would like to think that this is just what modern scholars believe. Okay, so that looks like a section which we need a little bit of clarification there. So then we got the endnotes to chapter 5, and he's got quite a lot there. In the sense that Westcott and Hort correctly identified the need to examine the relationships of manuscripts and demonstrated that it is simply not enough to count manuscripts, but instead to weigh manuscripts. So he's using the old type of Westcott and Hort material there that's been moved, with people have moved on from there. Okay. Then he's got Dr. Ruckman's materials are marked with this kind of looseness when presenting the facts. Well, that might be true. Until I really look at Ruckman's material, I can't make a judgment call on that. But perhaps White is right, perhaps he's wrong. He has misrepresented the facts with me, with Jeff Riddle, with many people. So it wouldn't surprise me. But then again, I think Ruckman... See, this is the problem. It's not one side or the other. Like when I'm looking at Gal Riplinger's material, I see it as just as bad as James White's material. Yeah, they're both wrong, on many things. But just that Riplinger comes to the same conclusion that I would come to. She holds up the King James and goes, that's the word of God. Where James White's like, I don't know where the word of God is. We're still going to make it. Yeah, he's a close representative. It's good enough for me, sort of thing. And so that's why the only reason why I get thrown into Riplinger's camp, because she's like, well, her conclusion is that how she gets there, it's all over the place. But as the KJV movement thrives, as the KJV only movement thrives, most in conservative, independent Baptist circles. Well, I would say that's true. Most of the people who are King James only had that I experience on Facebook and YouTube have come out of the Baptist world, and usually independent. The IFB. So look at the IFB. Usually they're King James. New IFB are all King James. So it's sort of like, to me that's the truth. So anyway, but it depends how you label the King James only. And it says most. It's not saying all. Now, many of us know that some of these statements are true and false, without having to see proof, because we have studied and know what he's talking about. But for those who don't, they would just have to believe him without question. Okay, so now I get what he's pointing out. He's just making these blanket statements, and he's not really footnoting it or saying, well, this is from a Barna statistical poll or whatever. He's just making these comments, and people just have to believe it. And James White does that. We know that he does that. He just makes blanket statements write off a whole group of people just because of one little thing. But then accept, Michael Brown, NAR stuff. If I kept saying to myself, says who, when I was reading the book, I'm sure that others have said the same thing when they read his book. So that's a really good thing to say, like, says who, just question everything. So that's pretty much what I'm doing when I do videos about Mark Ward, and I'm like, okay, says who, or where's this coming from, or what's the end game here, or let's examine this. If he's right, he's right. If he's wrong, he's wrong. And so we go through stuff, and it's like, no, sorry, Mark, you're wrong, or yeah, you're right. But then he's like, oh, King James people are, basically passive aggressively, will sort of say, they don't study, they don't like the original languages, blah blah blah. And it's like, but like he's saying, it says who. I know plenty of people who are obsessed with Greek and Hebrew, and but they're also obsessed with the King James. So there's nothing wrong with that. Correspondence in vain. I corresponded. So this is the author. I corresponded with Mr. White about his book. I asked him some questions regarding his book and his beliefs that are essentially designed to set him up. When I got to some of the before mentioned points in this article, he cut off communication, saying I was like Dr. Ruckman and wasn't worth the time. Well, that's exactly what he said to me in 2011 when I sent him my Easter article. He just said, you're a Ruckmanite. And it was like, how are you getting that? But now I understand he says Easter is a pagan festival. And so, that's been debunked, for 20 years. The whole concept of it being a pagan festival is just, it's always been a Christian festival. But that's what he said, I'm a Ruckmanite, I never called him a name or cut him down. The man, when confronted with evidence that contradicts what he wrote, threw out a flurry of statements like, you can't trust any quote Dr. Ruckman has in his books. Well, that's not a bad statement. I would agree with White there. And see, that's the problem. Some of these guys, they've got really good motives. They can have good arguments, but then they're like, yeah, and I'm quoting Ruckman. It's a bit, to me, it's sort of like, you can have some really good arguments on certain points of politics and all the rest of it. And then you're like, flat earth, and my credibility meter just goes ding ding, but down to zero. And I guess, White's like that with Ruckman and Ripplinger and others. And then he cut me off. The impression I got from him was that he thinks that his position is absolutely correct and any other position is inferior. The same attitude he accuses his opponents of having. He also admitted to me that his reform beliefs have influenced his view on the Bible. If this is the case, then should we not question his motives? Can we trust a hyper-Calvinist with the Bible issue? Mr. White is a hyper-Calvinist. So my understanding of hyper-Calvinists, and I want to steelman James White here. I'm not just, James White's bad and everything. He would not be a hyper-Calvinist because a hyper-Calvinist believes that someone has to hear the gospel to be saved. So, I used to go out preaching a lot with Calvinists in the Gold Coast, and, they would preach the gospel. They would say someone has to be born again. They have to hear the gospel. They have to be born again. And so according to the definition of a hyper-Calvinist is someone who believes, well, they're going to be saved anyway, so we can just sit at home and not go preaching and not preach the gospel, and they're going to be saved anyway, so who cares? So that's, to me, that's what a hyper-Calvinist is. And to me, that's how James White explains what a hyper-Calvinist is. So I'm just trying to steelman the argument there. So this guy's saying James White is a hyper-Calvinist. He is a member of the Reformed Baptist Church. So obviously this guy is like independent fundamentalist Baptist or something. Go to his website and see Alpha and Omega Ministries. We need to take this into consideration when reading his book. Since he admitted to me that his beliefs have influenced his views on the Bible, we need to take what he writes with caution, and we should as we should with any other hyper-Calvinist. I personally believe that he thinks his view of biblical transmission is the predestined way that God did it, and no other way is valid. Okay. So I guess him calling him a hyper-Calvinist, I remember back in the 90s, you used to just, it was sort of like, if you didn't like someone and they're a Calvinist, you called them a hyper-Calvinist because they got upset. But now understanding, hyper-Calvinist is basically someone who's like, they're Calvinist, but they don't believe you have to evangelize, So that's usually, if I'm wrong, let me know. But that's how I view James White's view of hyper-Calvinism, and that's how I would see it as well. Okay, I'll go through some of these comments. Hilly Billy says, no, it's where they threw the soldier in Elisha's grave, and when he touched the bones of Elisha, he came back to life. Okay. Pastor Brett says, I lost my signal for a while. I'm home now, catching up. Hilly Billy says, hey, Brett, my signal rolled under the table. I had to use my cane to fetch it. Of course, it's all dusty now. Pastor Brett says, I always tell critical text scholars that the burden of proof is on them. They brought the Codex Sinaiticus to the world. Yes, they have to prove to us that it's better. It's the oldest and best, like they claim. My pad phrased array drama detector is alerting me to an incoming wife emergency. I may be retreating to shelter abruptly. No worries, Hilly Billy. Pastor Brett says, why begrudge our defense of the word? Brett, I believe if you rode around with a sign that says ice cream is good or babies are cute, someone will take issue with it. Yeah. Okay, so I'll read through this last little bit. We're nearly gone for 3 hours, so hopefully we can just finish this. So he said his hyper-Calvinist thing, and then it says, his comments about those who attack Calvinism in his book show his Calvinistic leanings. Here is one example. So obviously this guy is part of a Ruckman group, See pages 230 through 233, where Palmer's reform beliefs are not only misrepresented but mercilessly ridiculed. He also refers to Calvinist Bob Ross or Calvinistic publications, Pilgrim Publications, for example, in his book 121 and 126 as legitimate sources. Some may say that, see, this is the thing. He's like, he quotes Calvinists, and this guy was upset that he was like, you're quoting Ruckman. They're both doing the same thing. You know what I mean? Like, instead of just looking at the argument, they're bringing personalities into it and denominations and all the rest of it. And so some may say that this is a personal attack on Mr. White, but this is not the case. Read the book, The Other Side of Calvinism by L. Vance, Vance Publications, Pensacola, Florida, and you'll get an idea of the power this false doctrine has over the mind and spirit of man, how it influences his thoughts and actions in a certain direction. Be careful with James White, reader. Romans 16:8 says, for they that are such serve not our Lord Jesus Christ, but their own belly, and by good words and fair speeches deceive the hearts of the simple. This concludes the article. It is my hope and prayer that those reading it will investigate what is written and will come to their own conclusions based upon prayer and study. Okay, so that was a good little read. I enjoyed some of that. Was very good. So this is AV 1611 site, a little bit Rickplingery, Ruckmany sort of thing, but this guy had some of his own good conclusions, and I was in agreement. Especially the previous video that I did was sort of like the first half of this, which I found was a lot more of his own understanding of what's going on. But I do appreciate also that he's just pointing out where James White just makes these type of claims and just says, he's saying the whole, says who, like he's just made a claim. And it's like, oh, we better believe White on that. So anyway, I think we're caught up with all the comments. I can't think of anything else I really need to talk about. But I did say after my previous video, I said, well, we'll jump back into James White's book next time. But then I was sort of a bit convicted that I didn't read through this whole article. The main reason was because he does mention Ripplinger and Ruckman. I thought, well, I'm better off reading through it and just holding up the flag saying I'm not in agreement. But yeah, I'll continue on with this book, and we will keep going through it, and we will ask, says who, in many of these quotations. We'll see if there's footnotes to match, but we'll go through and we'll check some of this stuff out in our next time. And so, yeah, God bless you guys. Thanks for joining us. And yeah, so we're going to set up Matt Singleton probably next weekend will be joining me, and we're going to go through some material. But myself and Pastor Brett are going to do a debate on Once Saved, Always Saved. So we're going to set up a date for that. So that'll be cool. And we got Christmas coming up. So it would be usually over Christmas, I talk about, the wise men and how modern Bibles usually call them the Magi and say that they're fire worshippers, which is interesting. So we're going to look at that. Hilly Billy says the emergency checklist said, close cowl flaps and deploy chocolates. Treat mitigated. You're a lifesaver. Helg says, regarding Peter Ruckman, I think his first few books in the 1960s up to manuscript evidence 1969 and 1970 are not too bad. I think the Bible Babel 1966 or 1967 was his first on the version issue. Okay. Pastor Brett says good night all. And yes, sir, and LMK. So I'm not sure what LMK is, but Hilly Billy says good night. God bless everyone. Happy Sabbath. Calvin says, what I've gathered from what James White and Mark Ward promotes against King James Bible believers, I would have to say they are the real false friends. Okay. Yeah. That's true. They're disingenuous. Helg says Zane Hodges had a review of it in Bibliotheca Sacra in 1967. That's interesting. Very interesting. So Pastor Brett says LMK means let me know. Yeah. So we'll keep in touch over that. So thanks for joining us, guys. God bless you. I'll play my fancy little outro, and we'll see you probably tomorrow. I'll make another video. Okay, God bless you, and we'll see you soon.